Chapter 1097. Bojo caressed her nose. The captain of the Special Forces, a criminal psychologist, the only heir of the Qin family and the grandson of the Yin family. There were so many layers of relationships. The old butler felt his head hurting. The Yin family that I know of. The Yin family. Bojo sat on the chair. They are rich, that's why I'm in such a passive position. The old butler glanced at his young lord's desolate expression, assuming that she was putting on a show. He placed his hands behind his back and spat out, "Tie her up." At the same time, at the Yin family mansion, a blond man with a hooked nose and a blade strolled in. He was in his late 30s, but Americans looked more mature than Chinese people of the same age. He was dressed casually, but his steps were graceful. Even though he didn't bother with the small details, he was well-mannered. He entered the hall and removed his hat. "Is Qin in?" The butler was momentarily stunned when he saw the person, but he regained his elegance. "Young master is in the study." He was in a rush. If Qin was back, he would definitely be able to solve the case on his hands. The wooden door to the study opened. Qin Mo glanced up, expecting to see the youngster who should be back by now. He hadn't expected to see an old friend. "You left in such a hurry, I don't think it was just to send me a document." Qin Mo sat with his legs crossed, placing his pen on the table. It wasn't anyone else, it was the famous investigator from the FBI, Stephen. He sat on the chair. "Qin, I encountered a difficult case and need your help." Qin Mo stood up, grabbing a newspaper from the coffee table. He flipped it open and glanced through it. Stephen couldn't sit still. "Qin, I'm serious, this case is really strange, the criminal knows hypnosis." Qin Mo interrupted him calmly. He was still as handsome as ever. "The crime scene has been destroyed. Your investigation isn't going in the right direction." Stephen's eyes widened. "You saw the crime scene. How is that possible?" Qin Mo reached out and pressed the back of the newspaper, tapping it with his fingertips. "Here, the serial suicide case, someone is suspecting the culprit, the photos were taken by the accompanying media." "That's it." Stephen's body was no longer as tense as before. "I thought you had some special ability to see the cases here from China." Qin Mo was still looking at the photos in the newspaper. His voice was neither fast nor slow. "Do you know why hypnotists are successful? It's because they don't just divert people's attention, they can also understand the psychology of ordinary people to a certain extent. They don't necessarily have to be at the scene to get the information." Stephen shrugged. Well, he was now classified as a normal person. There must be a connection between the victims. Qin Mo retracted his gaze. "Find the connection." Hearing that, Stephen stood up and wanted to leave. He was very emotional. Qin Mo frowned. Information. Stephen was helpless. "I've already given you all the information on Z. Moreover, didn't she go to China? Why are you here in America?" At this point, Stephen seemed to realize something. He suddenly raised his head and stuttered, Don't tell me that guy is back." Qin Mo glanced at him and spat out 2 words. "No." Stephen muttered, "That's good. Otherwise, I'll have to make another report." What was my subordinate, Smith, thinking? He insisted on going to China to capture Z. Now that he's back, I don't know what kind of blow he suffered, but he's depressed all day. Compared to when he made the report, his aura seems even lower, Smith. Qin Mo arched a brow. Stephen nodded. "Smith, what's wrong?" "Nothing." Qin Mo smiled teasingly. "You should leave, officer." Stephen. Didn't they say that Chinese people were warm and hospitable, especially foreigners? He must have gotten to know a fake Chinese person. But this trip wasn't in vain. The moment Stephen left the villa, he turned on the police light in his car. Chin Mo asked him to leave because too much time had passed. A certain someone should be back soon. Chin Mo unlocked his phone and dialed a number. Turned off his phone. Before leaving the country, the two of them had activated international roaming so that it would be easier to contact each other. Chin Mo's eyes dimmed when he heard the notification. He didn't call Movie Queenan. Instead, he pressed a string of numbers, his voice low. Go take a look at young Master Joe. Young Master Joe is still in the makeup removal room. It isn't convenient for me to go in. The person who spoke was at the filming location. It was the person who had video called Bojo. Chin Mo's frown deepened. Makeup room. How long has she been in there? Half an hour, the same for the other actors. Other than removing their makeup, they have to change their clothes. It's normal. Normal to others. But not to a certain someone. Chin Mo lowered his voice. Ask the staff to confirm if she is really removing her makeup. Yes. The moment the person heard his young master's order, he realized something was amiss. By the time he asked the staff, his throat was a little dry. Chin Mo didn't hang up. What's the situation? Young Master Joe didn't enter the makeup removal room, this. The person wanted to say that he had seen her enter with his own eyes, but in the next second, he remembered something. It's that person just now. That person had blocked his view. That was when young Master Joe had disappeared. Chin Mo tightened his grip on the phone, his back turning stiff. He had already made preparations, but wasn't it enough? Send someone to look for her. The coldness in Chin Mo's eyes was like a thick fog, entangling within. Focus on investigating Fifth Avenue. Yes. In reality, Chin Mo didn't know how he had hung up. That person had really left. She hadn't said anything, didn't leave any address, didn't even say goodbye. Chin Mo sat there, his heart feeling like it had been hollowed out. Before he had come here, he had heard her calling him Brother Mo. She seemed to be planning something when she was eating, her head furry like a little fox. Even though she was efficient, she was like a child at certain times. Hence, he wanted to take care of her no matter what. It was as though just hugging her and smelling her hair would make him feel better. She had been so close, but she had suddenly disappeared. The phone screen lit up. It was a photo of the two of them. Chin Mo's heart suddenly hurt so much that he had to bend over to stand up. It wasn't possible for him to continue sitting in the study. Chin Mo went to the filming location personally. Movie Queenan was still filming. But Chin Mo didn't look for Movie Queenan, he looked for the director. Are you saying that all the scenes have been filmed? It's only been a day. Chin Mo frowned. The director sat there, taking a break. I find this progress unbelievable too. Young Master Joe has a good grasp of the character's personality. All the scenes were shot in one go, and it was even more outstanding than I had imagined. It was as though he had always been that person. It was amazing. The director was excited when he talked about this, even showing the youngster's last scene. That scene was originally reserved for the opening scene. At that time, the youngster wasn't wearing a black trench coat. Instead, he was wearing a pure white shirt. He was sitting on a branch with lush foliage, with a book covering his face. After hearing the sound, he seemed to have just woken up from a dream. He took the book away with one hand, and his eyes were as bright as stars as he looked at the camera with a smile. His silver hair was a little messy, and two of the buttons on his shirt were undone. He looked extremely casual. Leaves fell, landing on the youngster's shoulders. When he blew on them, the scene was filled with the smell of sunshine. It was this youngster who appeared at the end. He was dressed in black and looked extremely handsome. Chi Nemo looked at the camera, his eyes undulating with intense emotions, but he restrained himself. He placed his fingers on his knees, clenched and released them. "Thank you, Director. I have something to do, goodbye." Chi Nemo stood up, walking towards the car. At this moment, he was certain. Someone had planned this from the start. Although it was just like what the director had said, many people couldn't finish filming in one day. But looking at the entire movie, a certain someone didn't appear in many scenes. A certain someone did not appear in many scenes. Most of the time, it was just her back. Only 3 scenes had captured her face. Therefore, it was not impossible to finish shooting all the scenes in one day. As long as that person had a heart. Chi Nemo sat in the car, one hand gripping the steering wheel tightly. He knew she was planning to leave. However, he didn't expect that she didn't miss it at all. Chi Nemo started the car at a frightening speed. What he didn't know was that when he started the car, a voice suddenly rang out. Behind his car, another car quickly caught up with him. The car came out from the side. It had smooth lines and was completely black. It also exuded a domineering aura. "Master, as a qualified sports car, I have to give you a suggestion. Judging from the speed of the other party's car, his emotions are very unstable. Should we bring some weapons?" Swoosh. Beautiful tail wagging. Bojo stopped the car, feeling slightly guilty. "You don't have to take the weapon." The navigation bar moved. "I didn't expect Master to have a guilty conscience. As long as I have the medicine grandfather Butler gave me." Bojo glanced sideways, her gaze landing on the passenger seat. The navigation bar. What kind of guilty conscience was that? As expected, it couldn't understand human emotions. "I have to think of a way to make the Almighty stop." Bojo's eyes moved. She remembered the phone in her pocket. She pressed the button to light it up. When she saw the 20 unread messages, she felt even more guilty. Even through the screen, she could feel the Almighty's desire to kill her. But since things had come to this, it would be a waste of time to be sentimental. She had to tie him up. Chapter 1098. Swoosh. It was another beautiful swing of the tail. Without any restraints, Bojo's racing skills were like those of an American blockbuster. The sunroof opened, her silver hair swaying in the wind. The youngster's thin lips and the lollipop in her mouth formed an indescribable mischievousness. The navigation beeped. 60 meters to the target. "Master, do you still remember? I have a bad feeling about this." "Oh, what exactly is this little vixen that you can't forget?" "It's affecting your judgment. As a car, you're too noisy." Bojo glanced at the back of the car, her gaze intense. "All right, I'll be quiet. But before that, I have to remind you that our tracks have been discovered." The navigation beeped again. "It's tiring for a girl to chase after a guy." Bojo arched a brow. He found out so quickly. As expected, it wasn't easy to kidnap the Almighty. Chi Nemo had indeed noticed something. If it wasn't for his mood. With his analytical ability, he would have discovered the car behind even faster. Chi Nemo narrowed his eyes and suddenly slowed down the car, catching her off guard. The Lamborghini Bat had quick reflexes. It slowed down as well. The 2 eye-catching sports cars sped along the straight road as though they were competing. It was a beautiful sight. Bojo licked her lips and spat out the lollipop. "It seems like I'm going to use my ultimate move." "Master, before you use your ultimate move, you have to take a look at the police cars behind you." If the navigation system could display an expression, it would be a facepalm. There are already 3 of them. Bojo glanced up at the rearview mirror. "Let them chase, the more the merrier." Hence, on the famous Fifth Avenue, besides the two sports cars, there was another row of police cars. This attracted everyone's attention. Analysis report: the car in front is slowing down, it seems like it's going to stop. The navigation beeped. Master, should we stop too? No, charge over. Bojo arched a brow. I have to find a chance to drug Brother Mo. He will be embarrassed if we drug him in front of so many people. The little bat. What kind of drug are you trying to drug him? After Chin Mo parked the car by the roadside, he watched as a black shadow flew past him. That speed was very fast. What was even stranger was that when the car brushed past, there was actually no one in the driver's seat. Inside the car, the navigation system buzzed again. Master, you don't seem to dare to face him. Bojo exerted strength with one hand, straightening her body. What do you know? This is called strategy. Navigation. I will quietly watch your guilty conscience. Bojo didn't say anything else. She shook off the first police car and took a detour to the other side. She shook off the second police car, and by the time she reached the third one, there was no need to shake it off anymore. The distance between the cars was too wide. In the sea of cars, there were no police cars in sight. But in the next second, the voice of the navigation system became extremely shocked. F***CK, F***CK, Master, what kind of little demon are you chasing? That fellow is now more than 100 meters behind us. This is too scary. Not only did you fail to chase, you're being chased instead. Bojo glanced at the rearview mirror. The Almighty was indeed cunning. How exactly did he manage to predict her route? The three police cars had unknowingly become his tools to test her. The more he thought about it, the brighter Bojo's eyes became. She moved her fingers, dialing a number. Chin Mo's fingers were placed at the side, preparing to increase his speed. Until that unique ringtone sounded. His gaze froze, and he slowed down instantly. He gave up on chasing the sports car that had been following him. He turned the steering wheel, stopping by the side of the road. He picked up the call, his voice cold. Where are you? As expected, he was angry. Bojo was still driving, wearing a black earpiece. She said seriously, I wanted to take a taxi to the place you told me, but I got lost. Is that so? Chin Mo obviously didn't believe her, but he was smart enough to know that the most important thing now was to find her. Send me your address. Bojo was slightly afraid. This place. I can't tell you the name. Why don't I find a cafe and share my location with you? Send it now. She could tell that he was trying his best to suppress himself. Bojo turned a corner and was nearer to the filming location. She tapped on the WeChat shared location. I'll wait for Brother Mo to pick me up. Mrs. Chin. On the other end of the line, Chin Mo spoke again, his voice as cold as ice. You better be waiting for me to pick you up. Bojo felt even more weak. He hung up. The navigation system heard him very clearly. How should I say this, Master? I think you've already lost your credibility with the other party. If the little fairy knows that you're going to kidnap her, she might chop you into pieces. Little Blackie, you're using your humor in the wrong place. Put me down and wait nearby. With that, she took out her smart key and walked into a cafe with desserts. The reason he chose this place was because it had the best view of the entire avenue. She also understood that in order to kidnap the Almighty, she had to use some tricks. He couldn't even do it openly. Bojo was helpless. Was it so hard to kidnap the one you loved? Bojo sat down, troubled. She ordered 2 cups of coffee and drugged one of them. When she drugged him, she also felt guilty. However, when she saw the red dot on the shared location getting closer and closer to her, she felt guilty. She would just be at the Almighty's disposal when the time came. Besides, if she didn't kidnap him, how was she going to treat his hand? Bojo admitted that she was finding an excuse for herself. But on second thought, the Almighty's suspicions towards her had been growing, and it was only a matter of time before he found out her identity. Before that, she had wanted to monopolize her pet for a few days. With that in mind, Bojo tapped the red dot on the screen. Her handsome face puffed up. That's it. Come. Outside the window. Chin Mo alighted from the car. Indeed, he didn't observe his surroundings. After all his thoughts were on locking a certain someone in his hands. When he got closer, he arched a brow. The best view. What was that guy up to? Young master, the car that followed you is near you. It's 9:00, be careful. It turned out that Chin Mo had always been followed by professionals. His communication tool was a small communication device under his black hair. He had been wearing it ever since he had arrived in America. Go take a look. Chin Mo walked forward nonchalantly. Even the passers-by didn't notice his orders. Yes. One of them shifted his position. Chin Mo pushed open the glass door and walked into the cafe. The first thing he saw was the youngster tapping the screen. Bojo noticed the gasps around her. She turned towards the source of the sound and saw the Almighty walking towards her. He was dressed in a business suit with a pair of handcuffs on his hands. It was extremely eye-catching. Was the Almighty trying to seduce her with his uniform? Bojo was about to stand up, but before she could speak, there was a click. Her wrist was locked. Everyone's gaze focused on her. The Almighty was probably the only one who could smile in such a situation. But that smile didn't enter his eyes. Chin Mo sat opposite the youngster as though there was no one else around. He tapped the handcuffed wrist with his fingers, exuding an air of nobility and abstinence. Bojo lowered her gaze before retracting it. Her eyes were clear. Why did you lock me up? What do you think? Chin Mo asked as he locked the other end of the handcuff onto his wrist. Bojo shifted. It's not convenient to drink coffee. Which cup? Chin Mo was still restraining himself. He was afraid he would do something he would regret if he was too violent. But when he remembered the news, he almost wanted to dig a hole. Bojo felt guilty. I don't have to drink. Chin Mo wasn't sure what she was thinking. Since she hadn't left, he should dissipate the coldness. He seemed to be calming his emotions. He reached out and pressed the back of her head, kissing her in that position. They were in the cafe. Bojo's eyes widened. Her mind went blank. Chin Mo retracted his hand, his lips still glistening. His voice was hoarse. I should have installed a tracking device on you. Bojo didn't have a chance to reply. Chin Mo probably wasn't in the mood to listen to her lie. He took a piece of cake and stuffed it into her mouth. Bojo puffed up her cheeks as she chewed. The Almighty pinched her cheeks. Just this once, do you understand? Bojo swallowed the cake. Sure, Brother Mo, can you help me remove the handcuffs? It's good to be locked up, it keeps you in check. Chin Mo's fingers caressed the corner of the youngster's mouth, wiping away the crumbs of the cake. His actions and expression were filled with an indescribable pampering. The people in the cafe were confused. What was going on? At the start, they had assumed the police were arresting someone. But now, they were confused. Was he under house arrest? It didn't seem like it from the youngster's expression. It was a mess, it was really a mess. Bojo rested her chin on the table, feeling slightly depressed. It's embarrassing to be locked up like this. If you don't want to be embarrassed, don't switch off your phone next time. Chi Nemo picked up another piece of fruit with his fork and fed it to her. It was obvious that the kiss had stabilized his emotions. Bojo felt that this couldn't go on. The Almighty who had regained his rationality was too difficult to deal with. Brother Mo, have some coffee. I ordered it for you. It would be a waste if you don't drink it, Bojo said naturally. Chi Nemo swept a glance at the coffee beside him. He didn't seem interested. Instead, he seemed to be feeding her. Bojo ate the various things that were fed to her, her gaze sweeping over the untouched coffee. She arched a brow. She was almost done with the dessert, but the Almighty hadn't fallen for it. This wasn't going according to her plan at all. At this moment, a faint sound entered Chi Nemo's ears. Chi Nemo straightened, widening the distance between them. He tapped on his watch. Young master, I found the target. There isn't anyone on it. The car's engine isn't turned off, but the door isn't open. It's a little strange. Just as he was speaking, the navigation system in the car moved. At this moment, little Blackie's mind was filled with thoughts. You foolish human, how dare you drive me without the password? Stop dreaming, wait a minute. But why wasn't Master out yet? This wasn't her usual style of doing things. Bojo wanted to head out too, but the Almighty seemed to be against her, refusing to drink the coffee. Helplessly, Chi Nemo suggested going home. In order to continue with her plan, Bojo could only use eating to stall for time. I want to eat another waffle. Chi Nemo glanced at her, reaching out to pinch her face. You look like a demon. Brother Mo, I'm locked in your hands, how can I be a demon? Bojo asked with a serious expression. I need to grow, eat more. Chi Nemo arched a brow, his gaze shifting downwards. Oh. Indeed, you should eat more. Bojo. Almighty, what are you looking at? Chi Nemo was relieved now that he had found her. Even though he wasn't sure what she wanted to do, he was happy to continue feeding her. Bojo watched as the 3 plates of waffles were placed in front of her, each plate ridiculously huge. She glanced up at the elegant face in front of her. The Almighty must have done it on purpose. Eat, you can ask for more after you finish. Once Chi Nemo was nonchalant, there was a hint of blackness in his voice. Bojo thought to herself, in order to tie him up, it wasn't a big deal to eat. She had a huge appetite anyway. It's boring to eat alone, Bojo replied. She reached for the coffee cup beside Chi Nemo's hand, bringing it to his lips without a second word. Chi Nemo didn't reject her this time. In fact, he rarely rejected her even after knowing her identity. In his heart, she was still a sensitive child who hadn't gone through puberty. When Bojo saw Chi Nemo's thin lips move slightly, she broke into a smile. Her smile was like the clear sunlight hitting the spring water. Chi Nemo subconsciously took 2 more sips, and half of the coffee went down his throat. If she had to describe it, Bojo would definitely have a vile person shouting proudly. But on the surface, she didn't reveal anything since she had to wait for the medicine to take effect. The effect of the medicine was really quick. Chi Nemo quickly realized something was amiss. The shadow in front of him was swaying. He lifted his lids and glanced over at the youngster. Bojo felt uncomfortable under his gaze, her voice sounding sheepish. I'm sorry, Brother Mo, I really want to tie you up. Don't worry, there aren't any side effects. Tie me up. Chi Nemo shook his head again, his brows furrowed. Bojo felt that she had gone overboard. She leaned over and kissed him. To tie you up. That's why I agreed to come to America to film. It's a little despicable, don't hate me. Chi Nemo froze. He was reminded of what a certain someone had been talking about in her dreams. He could guess many reasons why she wanted him to come to America. Chapter 1099. Qin Mo's brain froze for a moment, the shock in his eyes obvious. Apart from this guy in front of him, there was no one else in this world who could make young Master Qin so emotional. He had originally thought that she had been scheming all along just to escape from him. But in the end, kidnap him and bring him home. Qin Mo's head was still a little dizzy and his limbs were weak. But even so, his eyes were still very deep. No one knew what he was thinking, and his temperament did not change at all. This made Bojiu feel even more guilty. She muttered, "Why is the medicine that grandfather Butler gave me so weak?" In fact, the effect of the medicine was not bad at all. However, Qin Mo had received specialized training in this area. There was a certain degree of resistance to the medicinal effects. Bojiu bowed. Brother Mo, sorry for the offense." Qin Mo shook his head and narrowed his eyes. "Are you going to carry me out? I'll just hold on for a while." She didn't forget to observe his expression, afraid that he wasn't drugged. But it was obvious that Qin Mo had no strength in his limbs, and his head was getting dizzier. Bojiu took the chance to help him up, adding, "Brother Mo, I know you have to be mindful of your image. I won't carry you anymore, I'll carry you." Qin Mo gritted his teeth. "If that's the case, I might as well carry him." The bystanders were all astonished at how a youth could have such great strength. Bojiu was like a child who had received a treasure, kissing Qin Mo's face. The entire cafe was a little stunned. The man who came in handcuffs was taken away by the young man. This plot, the earphones hidden in Qin Mo's hair vibrated slightly. His voice was very soft. "Young master, what's wrong? Did something happen over there?" Qin Mo didn't answer. The people hiding in the dark glanced at each other and prepared to move. Young Master Zhou carried the young master out. Several people's gazes were focused on one point. What was going on? The young master didn't give any instructions. Did that mean that they didn't need to move? Just as they were guessing, Bojiu didn't notice that she had touched the public button. "Brother Mo, I know you must be angry at me for kidnapping you. This is..." Young Master Zhou's voice. Those people looked at each other again. This time, his eyes were clearly shaken. "Young Master Zhou kidnapped young master? Even if you're angry, there's nothing you can do. If you don't come overseas, you won't have a chance to do anything in China." Hearing this sentence, the person hiding in the long alley wanted to show himself. But at this moment, he didn't know if it was a coincidence. Qin Mo glanced up. The few figures stopped moving one after another. "Young master was looking at us just now." "I think so. But I don't think so." "Coincidence? Why do I feel like young master is telling us not to go out? Let's take another look." That's the only way. After all, the young master didn't give them any instructions. But the matter of the young master being kidnapped, before they could come up with a general outline, the figure who was still studying the Lamborghini on the left side of the road suddenly froze. Not because of anything else, but because the car's headlights suddenly lit up. Yes. The headlights came on. Bojiu pressed the driverless button on the car key. The navigation system fluctuated up and down. "Target locked, master." Even the gaze of the frozen figure trembled for a moment. What did he just hear? A car spoke. This world was a little fantastical. When the Lamborghini moved, the most important thing was speed. It swung its tail in an extreme turn. With a sharp turn, it sped towards Bojiu's direction. The next second, it braked, stopping in front of the two people. Even though Qin Mo didn't have the strength to retaliate, he was still able to think. The car in front of him was extremely familiar. It had been following him since the filming set. So it belonged to this fellow. Bojiu didn't care about her guilt anymore. She replied straightforwardly, I like you, Chin Mo. The car door opened with a loud bang. Chin Mo arched a brow, looking towards the youngster. Bojo caressed the bridge of her nose. Voice password. With that, Bojo bent over and placed the youngster in the car. Hence, everyone looked towards the side of the road. Young Master Joe placed their young master in the back seat with great effort, a serious expression on his face. Even though the timing wasn't right. They wanted to ask, was he that happy to kidnap their young master? Young Master Joe definitely didn't understand their young master well. This was practically kidnapping the devil back home. Bojo was clear about this, but she was afraid the Almighty would play some tricks. Hence, she took out the handcuffs Chin Mo had used just now and placed them on his wrists. Brother Mo, I'll unlock them for you when we reach home. Chin Mo didn't reply, but he frowned. Bojo knew that the Almighty wasn't willing to entertain her. In the end, Chin Mo asked, what did you use on me? To let you sleep, but Brother Mo, you're too dangerous, you're still awake. Bojo closed the car door and pulled open the driver's seat. The moment she held onto the steering wheel, she felt a little more at ease. However, there was a slight change in the navigation system. Master, there's someone tailing us. Bojo glanced at the rear mirror. She turned the steering wheel with her left hand and retreated swiftly. Then, she did a 180-degree turn on the spot, swaying the rear of the car. Her driving technique was elegant and beautiful. This made the people hiding in the other 3 cars want to give chase. They really didn't expect that their young master would be kidnapped. Logically speaking, that shouldn't have happened. How could their young master not have noticed? Indeed, Chin Mo had noticed it long ago. Ever since he had entered the cafe, the youngster's gaze had been on the cup of coffee beside his hand, as though asking him why he hadn't drunk it yet. Chin Mo had wanted to see what exactly she was up to. Hence, he had taken the opportunity to drink the coffee so that she would be more obedient after revealing her true colors. Even he did not expect that this guy was trying to kidnap him. Chin Mo lifted the corners of his lips subconsciously. But he wouldn't let the youngster see his emotions. He sat in the back seat, looking extremely weak. He was really dizzy. He raised his fingers and pressed them against his temples. Through his gaze, he could vaguely see the light. Chin Mo knew that the fox-like youngster was still wondering if he had really taken the medicine. He had to make her feel at ease. Chin Mo closed his eyes and leaned his head against the window while the drug was still in effect. The Almighty's current state was extremely alluring. His handsome face was slightly pale from the effects of the medicine. His wrists were handcuffed and his black hair fell down. His pure black lashes made him look abstinent. The navigation system vibrated. You're the little vixen that Master fancied when he was outside. Little vixen. Chin Mo's fingers stilled. He wanted to open his eyes, but in the end, he resisted the urge. After all, he wanted to see what else she would do to kidnap him. Bojo heaved a sigh of relief when she saw no reaction from Chin Mo. The medicine is finally taking effect. It wasn't easy. All that's left is to activate the automatic detection mode and plan a new route. Master, it doesn't seem that simple. The navigation system activated and a 3-dimensional image appeared on the screen. There are more cars than I expected. I thought there would only be 2 or 3. There were already 7 to 8 flashing red dots. The situation seemed bad. Bojo arched a brow. It didn't look like a police car, but she didn't have much time to think. With a loud swoosh, she drove the black Lamborghini through the crowd of cars, shaking off the car closest to her. She was sitting in front so she couldn't hear Chin Mo's voice. Young master, how are you? We have been following you and the locator is normal. We have set up a roadblock at the traffic light ahead. Once we reach it, the car will definitely not be able to pass. When they had said this, they had thought they would receive a signal to take action. Unexpectedly, the beeping sound from the watch was for them to retreat. Retreat? The shadows who were wearing headphones were a little confused. What about the roadblock? Retreat. Qin Mo's fingers moved slightly as he tapped on the watch. Even the roadblock was to be removed. The shadow guards glanced at each other. They had no choice but to follow their young master's instructions. They could more or less understand the meaning behind their young master's gaze. Simply put, all of you move away, don't hinder me from being kidnapped. In an instant, the inner thoughts of the shadows became more active, and the barricades that were blocking their way were removed. Even the speed of the chase was reduced from 100% to 70%, 60%, 100%, until they couldn't see the Lamborghini anymore. The shadow guards stopped moving and looked at the blinking red dot. They comforted themselves that it was fine, their young master's location was still there. But, what exactly was their young master thinking? Bojo, who had shaken off all the cars, was elated. She whistled and sighed. It's not easy to kidnap the Almighty. The shadow guards could hear the sound. When they heard her words, they looked up at the sky and thought to themselves, young Master Joe, young master has been cooperative enough. If he hadn't, you wouldn't have been able to kidnap him. Why do I feel that young master is happy to be kidnapped by young Master Joe? Let me tell you something. What? When young master came out of the cafe just now, he seemed to be smiling. It was clearly a kidnapping. Why did they get a taste of dog food? On the other side, the Lamborghini was already on the bridge. Bojo was still troubled. Little Blackie, what should I do if the Almighty continues to ignore me after he wakes up? Master, as expected, the little vixen's presence has affected your judgment. No one likes to be kidnapped. It's normal for him to ignore you. There were lines on the navigation system. He was extremely serious. The important thing is that he is kidnapped. Bojo glanced over and raised her eyebrows. She smiled. That's right. Bojo, who had been dealing with all kinds of unexpected situations, didn't know what Qin Mo had ordered. If she had known, she wouldn't have been so worried. Of course, Qin Mo wouldn't let her know either. From the start, young Master Qin was a perfect kidnapper. He was weak and handsome, just like a young master who had fallen from grace. Time trickled by. Dusk fell. The castle in the forest gave off a mysterious vibe that was difficult to get close to. Under the last rays of the setting sun, the Lamborghini drove into the courtyard. The old butler, who was dressed in a well-ironed suit and had British blood, was already standing there. There was a drowsy owl perched on the branch. It had to be said that this was a scene that would only appear in a comic book. If it wasn't for the modern Lamborghini that broke the harmony. The old butler opened his pocket watch. Even though it was a little late, they could still make it for dinner. Not bad. Bojo didn't call for help. Instead, she bent down and carried Qin Mo out. She smiled faintly. Brother Mo, you won't be in the mood to tour when you wake up tomorrow. I'll have to say this now. Welcome to my castle. Qin Mo didn't react. In a sense, he was asleep. Young lord. The old butler walked over. He was still holding his pocket watch. His gaze landed on Qin Mo's face. He looked back and forth. As expected of the family's grandson. That was what the old butler said. Deep down, he was thinking about something else. Did this youngster look down on his young lord? Was that why his young lord wanted to kidnap him? It had to be said that the old butler had a certain level of misunderstanding. Qin Mo wasn't aware of this. All he could feel was a certain someone holding on to him. Her breathing wasn't steady. Her sweet scent seeped into his nose. He could hear her saying, "This is my room. You'll definitely like it." The next moment, he was placed on the soft bed. His breathing didn't weaken. Instead, it became clearer. It was so clear that it made one's heart itch. Chi Nemo didn't have any energy. When he heard that Bojo wanted to leave, he tilted his body. His arm pressed down on her waist naturally. Bojo paused. Her clear eyes swept over the handsome face that was so close to her. Everything seemed like a dream. The Almighty had really been kidnapped by her. It felt as though they had returned to their younger days when they had slept face to face. But Bojo knew that this peace was temporary. When the Almighty woke up, he would definitely ignore her. She reached out and hugged Chinmo's waist. "I don't care, it's mine." This was the only thing she could say now. Bojo wanted to leave right after declaring her ownership. But in this position, it would take some time for her to break free. When her nose brushed past, her lips had to slide past Chinmo's lips before she could move his arm away. MMH. She had to take advantage of the Almighty now. But it was hard to say who would be the one taking advantage. With his eyes closed, Chinmo could feel the softness of her lips. There was even a hint of sweetness. Darkness descended. Bojo walked out of the room. Chinmo, who was lying on the bed, slowly opened his eyes. His eyes were the same as usual, so deep that they seemed to be able to emit starlight. Words for the readers, 4 in 1. Moi, good night. Chapter 1100. Young Master, how are you? A hissing sound rang in his ears, along with some static noise. It was probably because he was in the castle that the signal of the earphones was affected. Chinmo had always been cautious. Even though there was no one around, he didn't speak. Instead, he lightly tapped his watch twice. It meant that he didn't make any moves. After the shadow guards received the order, they asked tentatively, "Do we need to set up an ambush?" No need. Even though they couldn't hear young Master's voice, they could feel his nonchalance when he said those 2 words. "Is there anything wrong with your body?" They heard young Master Joe say that he drugged young Master. Finally, one of the shadow guards mustered up the courage to ask this question. Chinmo felt dizzy and didn't reply. The shadow guards didn't continue asking, mainly because Madame was also around. If Madame asked where young Master went, how were they going to answer? Forget it, they would wait for Madame to ask this question and then consult young Master. The sound from the earphones was gone. Chinmo felt the softness of the bed and the sweetness of the candy around him. He raised his eyebrows. What kind of kidnapping was this? If he didn't do anything after kidnapping, what kind of kidnapping was this? With this thought, Chinmo couldn't resist the sleepiness anymore. This time, he really closed his eyes. The next day, Chinmo wasn't in a good mood. Since he was the one who kidnapped him and brought him home, shouldn't he be in front of him? After that guy left last night, it was already 10 o'clock now. He didn't even show his face. What was the meaning of this? Breakfast was delivered by the old butler with the dining cart. Even in front of Chinmo, the old butler maintained his ancient elegance and politely treated his guests. He naturally ignored Chinmo's handcuffed hands. "Sir, do you prefer Chinese food or Western food?" Chinmo didn't answer this question. Instead, he said calmly, "It's not appropriate for the master to not show his face." Chinmo's words made the old butler take another look at him. He raised his eyebrows in surprise. "Sir, you're right. But young master has other things to do. After he's done, he will come and see you." Chinmo only said 2 words to this. The old butler put down the dishes. When he walked downstairs, he glanced at his pocket watch. Young master had already washed the car outside for more than 2 hours. If he continued to wash it, he would have to pay more for the water bill. Xiao He, the Lamborghini, also sensed its master's abnormality. Master, you've already cleaned my car mirror 10 times. If you continue, my beautiful skin will break. The curve on the navigation was very obvious. The internet says that it's not good for the car to keep washing it. Bojo arched a brow and continued splashing water. I'm doing this because I love you. Think about it, you haven't bathed for half a year. In human terms, you have to peel off a layer of skin to be clean. Then when master is bathing me, can you please not step on me and stare at the window on the second floor? This is an insult to my high intelligence. You must be thinking about that little vixen, the navigation system said angrily. Little Blackie, based on your observation of little vixen yesterday, do you think he will forgive me for kidnapping him? Bojo didn't retort, instead, she sighed deeply, her slender body sprawled on the ground. He won't. The navigation system wavered. Master, are you crazy? Why would anyone forgive a kidnapper? As a qualified smart sports car, I helped master do some research. You should sleep as much as you want when dealing with a kidnapper. Bojo thought about it. She felt guilty. If I sleep with him now, he will definitely stare at me. Sigh, why does the person I like have to be so rich? The almighty and unyielding, the Almighty's dungeon was too difficult. The old butler stood at the door, taking in everything. He was even more certain that the grandson of the Yin family didn't fancy his young lord. He really had no taste. The old butler frowned in disapproval. Bojo smiled when she saw him, her eyes brightening. How is it? Grandfather Butler, has the Almighty had breakfast? My cooking probably isn't to his liking. The old butler changed his words. Bojo was smart enough to realize that he was comforting her. Her gaze dimmed. The old butler had never seen such a young lord before. He had to find a time to ask that man what he liked. What was wrong with his young lord? Even though she felt guilty, she didn't want the Almighty to starve. She took the tray and prepared to head upstairs. At this moment, Bojo was exceptionally polite as she knocked on the door. Chi Nemo lay on the bed, his expression indifferent. Since when did kidnappers become so polite? Bojo's fingers paused. She pushed the door open, her eyes smiling. Brother Mo, change your mood and treat me as a guest. That way, you won't be so angry. Guest? Chi Nemo tugged on the metal chain, his attitude cold. Using this method. Bojo sat down, her lids lowered. I don't want to either, Brother Mo is too formidable. What if he escapes? I've tried this chain before, it doesn't hurt. Should I give you a good review? Bojo could hear the mockery in his tone. Brother Mo, I know you're angry but you have to eat. Don't skip your meal, your stomach will hurt. How am I supposed to eat when you're tying me up? Chi Nemo replied calmly. Bojo's brain short-circuited. She replied instinctively, that's easy, Sugar Daddy will feed you. She originally thought that the Almighty would glare at her until she turned into a black man. Unexpectedly, the Almighty merely scanned her from head to toe, remaining silent. Bojo grew bolder. It hadn't been easy to get her hands on him. She wanted to make use of the time to do everything she wanted. She held the bowl of pork and century egg congee in her left hand and the spoon in her right. She touched the glossy lips with it. Chi Nemo didn't open his mouth at first. Bojo watched him. He wasn't even willing to eat the food she fed him. Since you're the one who tied me up, you have to watch over me, Chi Nemo said slowly. Don't tease me just now. Bojo found a good excuse. I was washing my car. Chi Nemo smirked. Washing for 3 hours. Bojo. Little Blackie must have been speaking too loudly and the Almighty must have heard. Bojo had never seen such a cold and violent Almighty before. She couldn't help but feel frustrated. Fortunately, he ate the first mouthful of congee. Bojo was instantly motivated and fed him a second mouthful. Chinamo opened his mouth and swallowed the congee without a change in expression. He looked at the person who was feeding him with a deep gaze. How could there be such a happy person who allowed her to feed him a bowl of congee? His eyes were still bright, so bright that she wanted to kiss him. On this point, the two of them were of the same mind. But Bojo moved faster. She watched as Chinamo was quietly being fed by her and was reminded of their childhood. After the last mouthful of porridge was finished, she took the chance to lean over, sweeping her thin lips for a light kiss. But it managed to stop Chinamo in his tracks. Bojo knew the principle of escaping after a kiss. Otherwise, the Almighty might resist. She was already unhappy. If the Almighty didn't eat the food she fed him, it wouldn't be worth it. Chinamo arched a brow, looking at a certain someone. Bojo felt guilty again. She put on a serious expression. Brother Mo, there was a grain of rice at the corner of his mouth. Do you think I'll believe you? Chinmo's tone was indiscernible. Fortunately, it wasn't disgust. Coldness was still acceptable. She didn't dare to imagine being discussed by this person. Hence, she didn't really meet Chinmo's gaze. After feeding him, he subconsciously wanted to hide for a while. Chinmo spoke at this moment. Where do you intend to go? Do you think I don't need to go to the washroom? Bojo paused. The length of the metal chain is just enough to reach the washroom. It won't affect your movements. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Just as Bojo was about to move again, Chinmo spoke again. Chinmo's voice rang again. Have you thought about the consequences of locking me up like this? I have. Bojo lowered her head slightly. She knew that she would have to face this question sooner or later. But hearing it personally was a different feeling. Was he really starting to hate her? Chinmo swept a glance over Bojo. Then he stood up and used his other hand to pull her. He lowered his voice beside her ear. Why did you lock me up after you thought about it? I had to, Bojo replied in a low voice. It wasn't easy to tie it up. The conversation between the two of them was accurately transmitted to the other side. The shadow guards glanced at each other. They were all slightly shocked. They were shocked by their young master's acting skills. Young Master Joe definitely didn't know how cooperative young master had been when he had tied him up. Now, he was definitely making young Master Joe feel guilty. The shadow guards wanted to hear the rest of the conversation. Chinmo seemed to have thought of something. He retracted his hand and slid his fingers over his watch strap. This time, they couldn't hear anything. The shadow guards looked up at the sky. Young Master's tricks were really deep. Bojo was surprised that the Almighty would let her off so easily. She thought that he had grabbed her up to give her a beating. But on second thought, with the Almighty's upbringing, he wouldn't hit a woman no matter how angry he was. I need to take a shower. Chinmo looked at the youngster's head. Since you call yourself a sugar daddy, don't tell me you don't know how to do such a simple thing. Bojo looked up and blinked. Chinmo's handsome face was cold. How do I remove my clothes? I'm good at that. Bojo smiled. She looked as though she could take advantage of him again. A hint of a smile flashed past Chinmo's eyes. But there wasn't a hint of emotion on his face. Instead, his expression turned colder. Oh. I'll help Brother Mo, Bojo said as she unbuttoned his shirt. She smiled faintly. It's a small matter. This time, she was really taking advantage of him unscrupulously. She didn't have to worry about being oppressed by the Almighty. She had to admit that Qin Mo was indeed ridiculously good-looking. Especially when he was standing tall with his messy black hair. He lowered his head to look at her, allowing her to pull his shirt open to reveal his beautiful abs. He was so handsome that it made her heart beat faster. Done. Bo Jio's ears turned red. Qin Mo arched a brow. I don't have the habit of bathing in trousers. Bo Jio watched as his hand was locked. She gritted her teeth and reached out to unbutton his trousers. But the moment she touched it, she retracted her hand. It was scalded. Bo Jio glanced up instinctively. Qin Mo's expression was indifferent. If you can't do it, undo the chains and let me do it myself. Brother Mo, there's no use trying to provoke me. Bo Jio smiled, looking slightly devilish. I'll continue. Qin Mo watched as she lowered her head. Who said that provocation didn't work? His motive wasn't to get her to undo the chains. His gaze dimmed as he waited for the youngster to continue. Bo Jio reached her hand over. She thought for a moment and decided to negotiate. Brother Mo, can you make it less hot? I'm a normal man. Qin Mo's words denied Bo Jio's intentions. Bo Jio had no choice. She braced herself and tried her best to avoid the scalding heat. She unzipped his zipper. Once the zipper was unzipped, everything else became easier. But Qin Mo, who wasn't restrained by his clothes, couldn't shift his gaze away. Especially since he was wearing a black t-shirt. She was caught off guard and turned on the shower. When the hot water flowed down, a layer of mist rose. The water droplets landed on his black hair, glistening like pearls. They rolled over inch by inch, gathering on his V-line. It was a sexy mess. For some reason, Bo Jio's throat felt dry. Just as she was about to leave, he pulled her back. You want me to shower with one hand? Qin Mo's tone didn't change. What about my back? How do I apply the shower gel? You have time to shower your car but not me. Why did you tie me up? When Bo Jio heard this, her first reaction was to estimate the Almighty's danger level. It shouldn't be that high. She had to take advantage of him. I wanted to go outside to get the shower gel, Bo Jio replied seriously. Qin Mo exposed her mercilessly. It seems to be behind me. I didn't see it just now. Bo Jio smiled. I'll help you apply it now. With that, she pressed a few buttons on the small bottle, pressing the fragrant shower gel onto her palm. Her beautiful eyes were smiling as she caressed the abs she had been yearning for. As expected, it felt good. MMH. It was cool and smooth. And there was a jade-like feeling on his chest. Bo Jio smiled as she took advantage of the man she wanted. She didn't notice that when she lowered her head, the man she had tied up was smiling faintly. Bo Jio experienced the feeling of being a sugar daddy. If only the Almighty was willing to do all of this. For instance, he would become her pet again. When they were young, he had already agreed that he was hers. But in the next second, her hand was pressed against the wall. That kind of strength was enough to prove that it was impossible for her to imagine it. Her back was pressed against the cold wall. The next moment, a man's voice rang out, carrying with it the steam of the bathroom and the warmth of the hot water. The slightly cold breath hit the back of her ears, making her heart tremble. Who exactly are you? The question finally came. Chapter 1101. When she had decided to kidnap the Almighty, Bo Jio had predicted that once she made a move, the details would be exposed. The Almighty would definitely suspect her identity. No, that wasn't right. The Almighty would definitely suspect her identity. Because before this, the Almighty had investigated her many times. The men he had specially sent to follow her and the countless tests all proved that the Almighty had suspected that she was Z. But in China, she had taken advantage of her rebirth. But now, how was she going to explain her familiarity with the streets of New York? Xiao the smart Lamborghini, and the castle were parked downstairs. The Almighty would never believe that the Fu family was that rich. In reality, she couldn't come up with anything. Anyway, she was already kidnapped. What was there to be afraid of? Bo Jiu was decisive. Even though she was pressed against the wall, she didn't seem to have any intention of retreating. Instead, she lifted the corners of her lips, her voice seductive. Brother Mo, have you already guessed my identity? I'll let you say it yourself. Qin Mo's thin lips were very close to her ears. He was so close that if Bo Jiu tilted her head, she would be kissed. She had no choice but to maintain her position. She glanced up, her lashes damp. I'm Z. I'm the Z that you've been chasing. Qin Mo's fingers paused, as though they had stopped. Bo Jiu admired the Almighty's rare pause. She reached out and hugged his neck. Brother Mo, don't even think about escaping. I know how to imprison people. Qin Mo looked down at the sparkling mole. The back of his hand stiffened. He pushed her away and closed the bathroom door. Bo Jiu almost fell when Qin Mo pushed her. She stood outside the door, watching the closed wooden door. When she lowered her head, she felt a tinge of loneliness. Why was there such a huge reaction? She hated him. Bo Jiu looked down at her hand. That was true. Who would like a kidnapper? Besides being a kidnapper, they had been enemies. Bo Jiu had thought about his reaction when her identity was exposed. She could guess. She lifted her eyes and glanced at the door that had been pulled up. She listened to the rustling sounds inside. She paused for a moment before taking heavy steps out of the room. In the bathroom, Qin Mo closed his eyes, the image of a certain someone clinging onto him. When her thin lips moved slightly, it was as though she was silently inviting him, as alluring as a water demon. However, it was clear that this was not the right time to do some things. Gradually, the restless breathing stopped. Qin Mo grabbed a white scarf and wrapped it around his waist. He wiped his wet hair and came out, only to realize that a certain someone had disappeared again. Qin Mo's eyes dimmed. It seemed like his sugar daddy didn't have the slightest awareness of tying him up. Sugar daddies also had their own troubles. Bo Jiu had never been so worried before. The moment she couldn't think straight, she decided to wash the car. As a top-notch sports car, Blackie's entire body was filled with rejection. Master, put down the bucket of water in your hand. I think we should have a good chat first. The smart navigation system fluctuated. Bo Jiu held her chin, indicating that she wasn't in the mood to chat. The navigation system knew its master best. Before the bucket of water splashed on it, it said in advance, I have a way to deal with the little vixen you like. Bo Jiu kept the bucket and stuffed a hand into her pocket, looking carefree. Tell me, how do you want to deal with him? I just searched the internet. There are many ways, but after my computer summarized them, there are basically 3 steps. The navigation system acted as though it was serious. Kiss him, hug him, and *CK him. Bo Jiu picked up the bucket again and splashed the water onto the Lamborghini. Little Blackie, don't read those erotic novels in the future. Master, wait, really, wait a little longer. It really didn't want to be washed again. There's a more tactful method. The first step is to confess. Bo Jiu tilted her head and thought for a moment. That's still reliable. The second step, create romance. The navigation system continued to fluctuate. Bojo arched a brow. What's the third step? You can lie on the bed and have a heart-to-heart talk. Once the atmosphere is good, you can take another step and use your beauty to take him down. Bojo patted the Lamborghini. Not bad. Little Blackie. Their master was really tied up by a little vixen. Sigh. As long as the Almighty didn't ask her to leave, she didn't need to leave at all. Even if his attitude was a little cold. But since she was the one who kidnapped him, it would be weird if he was warm. Bojo lifted her legs and went upstairs. The moment she opened the door, she heard the deep and melodious voice. What is it? Sugar Daddy is so free to tease me again. Bojo laughed and jumped onto the bed. She looked at Chin Mo, looking carefree. Chin Mo couldn't predict her actions. She was so close to him that he could hear her breathing. He leaned against the headboard and she was just beside his hand. If it wasn't for the butler who always walked back and forth by the door, he would have broken the handcuffs long ago to let her experience the consequences of teasing him. Go down. Chin Mo's voice was calm, but he didn't look at her. Bojo pressed his leg with one hand and smiled. Brother Mo, why didn't you ask me why I am Z? Would you tell the truth if I asked? Chin Mo tilted his face, not a hint of emotion on his face. Bojo muttered, it's a long story. I changed my identity when I woke up and became the young master of the Fu family. I didn't mean to lie to you. You mean you became another person? Chin Mo already knew all this. He was just saying this to make the youngster maintain this position for a longer time. Bojo glanced up. I know it's hard to believe, but it's the truth. Alright, let's not talk about such an unpleasant topic. Brother Mo, why don't you ask me why I kidnapped you? The old butler was guarding the corner of the wall. When he heard his young lord's words, he thought to himself, why didn't you mention it? It would be weird if they could continue the conversation. As expected. Chin Mo's voice became faint. Why? Because I like you too much. Bojo's eyes lit up, her smile clear. I can't control myself. Chin Mo's heart skipped a beat. She was breaking the rules again. Through Chin Mo's handsome face, Bojo couldn't tell what he was feeling. She took the opportunity when he was in a daze to tilt her head and kiss his slightly cold lips. Bojo wanted to leave after the kiss. If she was pushed away, it would be too awkward. But just as she was about to move back, she heard a clattering sound. It was the sound of metal chains sliding. His wrist was pressed down by someone, and even the kiss became an existence that made him feel hot all over. She was attacked continuously. It felt as though all the air was sucked away. A numb feeling exploded from the tip of her tongue. Her waist was being hugged. In between breaths, his breath landed behind her ears. Do you think I'll allow you to tease me obediently? Bojo waited for the strength to gather. She was a little afraid to meet his eyes. She tilted her head. No. But. Chin Mo hugged the person in his arms, burying his face into her delicate and fair neck. It depends on my mood. Bojo's eyes lit up. Was there room for negotiation? Firstly, I don't feel comfortable being chained up like this. Chin Mo's tone was calm. Unlock the lock. Bojo felt that the Almighty was too cunning. He was obviously using his charm. She didn't get a response. Chin Mo opened his mouth again, his voice cold. You tied me up and threw me here. You can interfere when you want and ignore me when you don't want to. It doesn't make sense if you don't pick the lock. Or do you not believe in your skills and think you can't keep me here? Didn't you drug me? The drug is still in effect, isn't it? I'll unlock the lock. Bojo lifted her head. But Brother Mo, after I unlock the lock, don't leave. Grandfather Butler can treat your hand. If you really want to leave, I'll let you go after he's treated. Chin Mo caressed her face with his fingers and said something that couldn't be matched. Sometimes, you really seem like an idiot. Bojo was about to retort. I promise you. Chin Mo retracted his hand. He looked like a noble young master, pure and abstinent. Bojo moved her fingers, a key appearing at the tip of her fingers. The next moment, there was a loud clang. The metal chain was unlocked. Chin Mo leaned against the wall, his long legs half bent. He twisted his wrist twice, his eyes still as deep as ever. I don't have any energy, help me up. Bojo was even more certain that the Almighty wasn't that dangerous. She reached out to help him. The old butler frowned. Was it because he had given his young lord too much drug? Was that why his strength hadn't recovered? The old butler adjusted his spectacles, deciding to take a closer look. From a certain point of view, Chin Mo was indeed movie queen and son. He leaned on Bojo, his expression calm as though he really didn't have any energy left. Bojo thought about something and asked, "Were you tired when you showered just now?" Chin Mo replied. Bojo added, "Let Grandfather Butler treat Brother Mo's hand first." Chin Mo remained silent. Bojo thought about how she was going to look for little Blackie later to use her beauty trap. In the end, she was the one who fell for it. Fortunately, from a certain point of view, the Almighty couldn't leave yet. Bojo didn't forget her main purpose of kidnapping the Almighty. She brought her men over to the old butler. The old butler was sizing Chin Mo up. Chin Mo was trying his best to hide his sharpness. His thin lips were still pale, adding to his fragility. "Young lord, bring this guest to the basement." The old butler carried the oil lamp, leading the way. Bojo carried him without hesitation. She couldn't see the faint smile on Chin Mo's face when he lowered his lids. As for why Chin Mo did that, it was simple. Firstly, he enjoyed the feeling of being held in her hands. Secondly, he wanted to understand her. Obviously, he could only do that by staying here. There was one more point, which was also very important. She had never completely let her guard down against him. Hence, she didn't believe that he wouldn't leave even if she unlocked the door for him. There was a click. The old butler turned on the light. That was when they realized that there was a complete set of surgical equipment in the basement. There were even various instruments and human organs soaked in containers. "Please." The old butler's solemn expression was indeed frightening. Young Master Chin was probably the only one who could remain calm in front of him. Chin Mo arched a brow, his words directed at Bojo. "How am I supposed to believe that you aren't going to dissect me? You are going to treat my hand. There's no point in studying you." The old butler's voice was calm. "Young Master Chin, you are a friend that young lord brought over. Trusting the owner of this castle is the only thing you can do now." Chin Mo retracted his gaze. "What if I don't cooperate?" The old butler kept his watch. "I'm not willing to treat you either." Bojo watched as the two of them started arguing. She glanced at Chin Mo's side profile, remembering the Almighty's memory loss. Suddenly, she asked, "Brother Mo, are you afraid of lying on the bed like this?" Chin Mo's fingers stilled. He tilted his head. "What a joke, why would I be afraid?" She had to learn to think in reverse when interacting with the Almighty. If he said he wasn't afraid, he was definitely afraid. Bojo reached out to hold Chin Mo's hand. "Brother Mo, I'll watch over you. Besides, my castle is very safe, no one will come." Chin Mo's gaze swept past the youngster's face. "If you dare to take a step away, throw me out of the window," Bojo replied. Chin Mo seemed to be smiling. Bojo wasn't sure since the lighting was a little dim. All right. Bojo glanced up at the old butler. Bojo glanced up towards the old man. Grandfather Butler. The old butler harumphed, starting to prepare the tools. As he moved his hands, he asked, "Has the injured hand been operated on before?" "Yes." Chin Mo was extremely polite. The old butler stretched out his hand and pressed his wrist that was wrapped in a white bandage. In an instant, a thin layer of sweat formed on Chin Mo's forehead. The old butler's eyes sunk. It was more serious than he had expected. Bojo observed the old man's expression, her heart sinking. In the end, the old butler didn't want to see his young lord disappointed. He fiddled with the surgical light. Even though the injury is serious and he didn't recuperate enough, it isn't completely incurable. "Lie down, I'll administer the anesthesia." Chin Mo did as he was told. He laid on the operating table, still wearing the white shirt from before. He looked like a noble, even his posture was elegant. However, the old butler met with a problem the moment he started the operation. He had used a lot of anesthesia and sleeping ingredients in the needle. But the person lying on the bed didn't seem to have any intention of falling asleep. The old butler narrowed his eyes, a sharp glint flashing past his eyes. The next moment, he stopped what he was doing. "Apologies, Mr. Chin, I have something to discuss with young lord alone." The old butler didn't give Chin Mo a chance to reject. He reached out and pulled Bojo to the side. His voice was so soft that only the two of them could hear him. "Young lord, do you think the effects of the anesthesia haven't worn off?" Chapter 1102. The old butler paused, frowning. Then, "Young lord." He unlocked him. The old butler didn't finish his sentence. Bojo interrupted him. "That isn't important, he will leave sooner or later. The most important thing is to treat his hand before he leaves. Hence, I have to ask Grandfather Butler, a soldier's hand is too important. Even though he doesn't have a military rank now, I know he will have to return to the military one day. As for why I unlocked him, I feel that someone as handsome as him shouldn't be chained to the bed. He has such a limited range of movement. In China, he had many chances to chain me, but he only threatened me verbally and never resorted to such methods. Now that he's in my territory, I won't break his wings even though I want to keep him. Grandfather Butler, please don't be prejudiced against him, he's actually..." Bojo scratched the back of her head as though she was trying to find the right words to describe him. Then she smiled. "He's really good." The old butler retracted his gaze, not saying anything else. Basically, he couldn't say anything to his young lord's request. But when he saw how much his young lord liked someone, he couldn't help but worry. He was really worried that his young lord would get hurt. When he walked towards Chin Mo, the old butler's expression was still stern. He lifted his pocket watch and glanced at it. "The operation will take a long time, I have to put you under anesthesia. If you don't sleep, I won't be able to do the operation." Regardless of his past experience or the training he had received, he wouldn't fall asleep easily. Both the old butler and Chin Mo knew that it was a psychological reason. Chin Mo wouldn't let his guard down so easily unless he was seriously injured. Although this sounded a little strange, the problem they faced now was that they had to sleep before the surgery. The old butler assumed that Chin Mo would reject the operation. Based on his judgment, Chin Mo was meticulous and seemed polite but wasn't easy to get close to. It was destined that he wouldn't trust anyone. Besides, his young lord had kidnapped him and invited him over. He would probably be more resistant, however, the old butler hadn't expected this. At this moment, Chin Mo, who was lying on the operating table, suddenly reached out to grab her wrist. His voice was calm. "All right, I'm going to sleep now." "All right?" The old butler was stunned when he saw this scene. He watched as the man slowly closed his eyes and turned to look at his young master. Bojio replied proudly, "I can put you to sleep." The old butler reached out to push in the new anesthetic needle. At this moment, the elegant young Master Qin's muscles actually relaxed. Just how assured was he? Only then would he lower his guard in front of that person. This was extremely difficult for those who had undergone special training. It seemed like young Master Qin didn't care about young Master. The old butler's heart finally relaxed a little. When the surgery started, the medicine started to take effect. Qin Mo's hand started to loosen, but he still wanted to hold on to a certain someone. It was as if this was the only way he would not be swallowed by the emptiness that came from the depths of his heart. But he couldn't catch it. He couldn't grab it no matter how hard he tried. Oh no! This was the old butler's first reaction. This surgery required the patient's complete cooperation. Otherwise, the slightest movement would cripple his hand. But Qin Mo, who was lying on the operating table, seemed to have been agitated. The thin sweat that seeped out of his forehead had already drenched his black hair. Even his body was filled with extreme unease. It seemed like he was having a nightmare, but it wasn't exactly. But if he continued moving like this, the surgery would definitely fail. "Young lord." The old butler who was wearing a surgical mask said hoarsely, "Hold him down, you have to hold him down." Bojio looked at the fragile person on the operating table. She didn't know what to do. Yes, for the first time in her life, she didn't know what to do. If it had been someone else, she would have used brute force to calm him down. Otherwise, she would have knocked him out. But it wasn't someone else, it was Qin Mo. He was the only person she had wanted to hold in her palms ever since she was young. "Young lord." The old butler pressed down on Qin Mo's shoulders. From his expression, it was obvious that he was trying his best to suppress the other party. When the old butler turned back, he saw Bojio's face. His voice lowered. "Young lord," the old butler had only seen this side of Bojio once. When his master had died. That youngster had stood in front of the gravestone. Her eyes had lost their luster and she didn't know what to do. "Now, young lord," the old butler opened his mouth, wanting to say something. Bojio suddenly lowered her lids and raised Qin Mo's hand, her thin lips landing on it. The kiss was so natural. "Brother Mo, I'm here too." The youngster's clear voice echoed in the quiet basement, adding an indescribable warmth. "I'm here too." Regardless of what was in your dream or what you were experiencing, you weren't alone. Qin Mo was indeed dreaming. Once he was in such an environment, he would enter a deep sleep. That kind of dream would come out. It was an endless stretch of water. His entire body was in the water, trying his best to grab hold of the other party. But that person fell deeper and deeper, until the darkness engulfed everything. No matter how painful it was, even if it tore his heart apart, it was useless. Because he couldn't save her anymore. Until he felt a warmth on his palm. Only then did Qin Mo stop moving. He opened his hand and finally grasped something. It wasn't cold water anymore. It was a person's body temperature. That kind of body temperature always made him feel comfortable. It was so comfortable that for a period of time, when he woke up, he felt as though he was hugging a little son. Suddenly, the dream changed. Qin Mo frowned. Qin Mo frowned because he had never dreamed of such a dream before. A little girl with soft black hair was hugging him. She was wearing tiger pajamas and had a pair of furry ears. He couldn't see her face clearly, but he could vaguely feel that she was cute. Her face was rubbing against his shoulder as though she hadn't woken up. Her voice was warm, like a little kitten, with a nice milky scent on her body. Her entire body was soft and her words were like a fox's. I'll sleep a little more, just a little more. Since I've hugged you to sleep so many times, it doesn't matter if I do it once more. At most, I'll let you hug me to sleep. Qin Mo's deep eyes weren't completely focused on the little girl. He could clearly feel that in this dream, his hands and body had become smaller. It was as though he had returned to when he was 4 or 5 years old. Chapter 1103. Why was this happening? In the dream, Qin Mo paused. He retracted his gaze and looked at the furry head in his arms. What was even stranger was that he was talking in his dream. If you don't wake up, there won't be any milk to drink. You won't be able to grow taller. The tiger-like girl in his arms leaned against his neck. Her voice was clearer. How should I say this, Momo? I'm taller than you, you don't have to worry about this. He seemed to have clenched his fist. His chest was filled with anger. He reached out to pull her away. Boys grow slower than girls. Don't you know this common sense? The little tiger shook her head. No, I'm young. I don't know anything. Whenever she faced a problem, she would say that she was young. In the dream, he was obviously too young and didn't have much patience. He gritted his teeth in anger. Are you forcing me to throw you out of the window? Momo, how many times have I told you? Life is beautiful, but you're too hot-tempered. Don't be like this. You're getting old. When the little tiger said this, she was as serious as she could be. She was so serious that Qin Mo wanted to see who exactly she was. But the dream was slipping away. Every part of it was a mess. It wasn't connected at all. When he wanted to know something, the light turned bright. The light suddenly became bright, and when it hit the eyes, it was a vast expanse of white thorns. Qin Mo wanted to raise his hand to block the light, but his wrist was pressed down. The next moment, a clear and familiar voice could be heard. Brother Mo, hold on for a while. Hold on. Qin Mo tried to open his eyes. He glanced sideways at the person beside him. She was holding onto his wrist. Her body temperature was just right. When he saw that face, Qin Mo remembered that he was still on the operating table. Done. The old butler heaved a sigh of relief. The surgery seemed simple since it wasn't a brain surgery. However, there were meridians on the wrist. The details had to be controlled very strictly. If one wasn't a top-notch doctor, they wouldn't be able to perform this surgery. This was related to experience and skills. But even so, the old butler still lifted his hand to wipe the sweat off his forehead. This was enough to prove that this surgery wasn't easy. Everything returned to normal. Qin Mo fell into a light sleep. Bo Jiu stood there, watching the sleeping almighty. She placed one hand on the operating table and tilted her handsome face. She bent down and kissed his face. Such a scene. After the operation was over, there was an indescribable sense of warmth. When the old butler took off the white medical gloves, his movements paused for a moment. It was probably because he knew that with young master status, it was impossible for him to have good feng shui with young master Qin. The reason why the two of them were here, including the young master's method of tying someone up, even if it was just for a few days, was probably because she was Qin Mo wouldn't wake up anytime soon. Bo Jiu took the opportunity to talk to little Blackie. After the Lamborghini was opened, the navigation system continued with the previous procedure. The first thing it asked was the result. Master, how is it? Have you already taken him down? A honey trap is not a good idea. Bo Jiu turned the steering wheel. Brother Mo doesn't have much time here, we have to do something romantic. Romantic? Was pouncing on the other party not romantic enough? The navigation system felt that it couldn't understand human thought. But this didn't affect how cool it was. Master, I just went to summarize. 90% of the netizens think that drugging is the fastest. Bojo arched a brow. Shallow, I don't just want to sleep with the Almighty. The navigation system vibrated. Master, forgive me for being direct, but when I mentioned drugging, the seat detected that your heart was beating twice as fast as before, which means that you were tempted by my suggestion. Little Blackie. Bojo moved her fingers and was about to turn off the navigation system. The navigation system shouted, Master, there was an error in my procedure just now. I suspect that someone planted a virus in my body. If not, why would I say such an error? Good. Bojo held on to the steering wheel and made a turn, heading towards the long bridge. This was the direction towards Fifth Avenue. A few black men who were scribbling on a certain street kept their things when they saw the car. They were on high alert as though they were guarding against thieves. Bojo intentionally lowered the car window to greet them. It was obvious that the black men didn't appreciate this. They didn't dare to leave even if they wanted to. F***CK. Come, I have a cigarette. Bojo opened the car door and walked out, placing her arm lazily on one of the black men's shoulders. Are we brothers? The black man. Who's your brother? How about this, I'll ask for some information and we'll calculate it according to the price in your industry. Bojo passed him a cigarette. The black man accepted it since no one would say no to money. It's on the street next door, the place where the movie is being filmed. Did anything happen? Bojo tied him up. Of course, she was most concerned about movie Queen Anne's reaction. Did the police receive any missing person reports recently? The black man stretched his hand out, 5 fingers full. Bojo pressed his hand, allowing him to retract one finger. This is the price in the industry. If there's anything more valuable, increase the price. Didn't you just say that we are brothers? The black man couldn't help but retaliate. Bojo looked at him and smiled. There's a saying in China, even blood brothers should settle their debts clearly. With that, she took out a few foreign currency notes and stuffed them into the black man's shirt pocket. Tell me about your information. Everything about the movie is normal. The police are not looking for anyone, but there is a case that is quite strange. After the black guy finished speaking, he waited for the person to ask him. Generally, if the other party took the initiative to ask, the price would definitely rise. Unexpectedly, the youngster arched a brow. Oh, I'm not interested. The black man. F***CK, that's not how my script is supposed to be. Hey, brother, wait a minute. The black man saw that Bojo was about to leave, reaching out and grabbing onto the youngster's wrist. Wait a minute, this information is really worth it, we can discuss the price. Bojo paused, stretching out 2 fingers. The black man gritted his teeth, bending the youngster's fingers, adding one more. This price, I can't go any lower. All right. Bojo stuffed one hand into her pocket. What's strange about the case? The black man glanced around. This is insider information, I'm not sure if you've heard of these words. Bojo tilted her head, lighting a cigarette, signaling for him to continue. The maiden sacrifice, the black man said. Bojo narrowed her eyes. Tell me about it. The police aren't sure yet, but the people in the underworld are saying that the other party knows hypnosis, it's for the sake of the sacrifice. Bojo listened to the black man's endless supply of information, her hand in her pocket tightening. There's something that the police should have noticed, their targets are all Chinese. Bojo took out another foreign currency, stuffing it into the black man's hand. Hey, that's too much. The black man took a look. Bojo waved her hand. Your information is worth this price. After saying that, she walked into the phone booth in the same way as before. Everything on this street seemed to have been bewitched. Even if it was just an old man in a traditional Chinese suit, one shouldn't underestimate him. There were many secrets, but they were all in the underworld, not for outsiders to know. After Bojiu entered the warehouse, the first thing she did was switch on the computer. After locking onto the case, her fingers flew across the keyboard, forming a light wave that quickly entered a local area network. She switched to a fake IP, shook off the first wave of interceptions, and continued to hack. But Bojiu hadn't expected the case's encryption level to be so high. S-grade. It seemed like they were afraid of causing panic. Bojiu paused for a moment, her handsome face tilted slightly. There must be a breakthrough. But she had to be fast. The system here was very powerful. If she wasn't fast enough, she would be easily discovered. Fortunately, this was Fifth Avenue, the equipment Bojiu used was the most advanced. If it was a normal laptop, it wouldn't be able to keep up. Found it. Bojiu pressed the spacebar, changing the direction of the intrusion. A dialog box popped up, countless codes changing continuously. In the end, she tore a small hole, as though she was performing a magic trick. Because Bojiu used the other party's IP address, this would cause her to disappear from the defense network for 5 seconds. 5 seconds was enough. The intrusion was complete. After obtaining the information, she was thinking of a way to leave. A skilled hacker didn't simply hack. Instead, after the intrusion, he would wipe away all traces of the intrusion, not causing any damage. Bojiu tilted her head, watching the completion of the program. In an instant, she unplugged the USB. She looked at the information on another computer. Every picture showed that this wasn't a simple suicide. Especially one of them, there was a smile on his face, as though he wasn't in any pain. Bojiu narrowed her eyes. Then she seemed to have discovered something, enlarging the picture and locking onto the girl's arm. Needle mark. It seemed like the person wasn't content after escaping. Bojiu kept the USB, glancing at the time. The information had to wait until she returned. It wasn't a suitable time to sneak into the police station. Besides, she should show these things to the Almighty, she should be able to get more clues. Bojiu was clear that even if she had kidnapped him, the Almighty wouldn't reject anything related to his safety. She could make the way she received the information more romantic. Bojiu glanced up, her gaze landing on the row of drones on the second floor. Dusk started to fall. Dusk in the suburbs was always exceptionally beautiful. The European-style castle was surrounded by roses, blooming with an enchanting fragrance. When Chi Nemo opened his eyes, the first thing he smelled was the fragrance of black tea. His entire arm was secured by bandages, there wasn't a single gap. Other than that, there shouldn't be anything else inside. Chi Nemo felt a slight numbness in his fingers, everything else was normal. But was it a habit for a certain someone to leave him alone on the bed? Chi Nemo sat up, not seeing the metal chains. His gaze deepened, his fingers caressing the blinking dots on his watch. A voice came from the earpiece. "Young master, you finally turned on the receiver, thank God." Chi Nemo stood up, facing the excitement on the other side, choosing a white shirt prepared for him. His voice was calm. "What's the matter?" "Madam asked us where you and young Master Jiu went." The shadow guards didn't know how to answer this question. Chi Nemo stood tall, buttoning the buttons on his wrist, his voice extremely natural. "Tell Madam that someone brought me to meet her parents, we can only go back in a few days." The shadow guards. Meet her parents. Only their young master could describe a kidnapping in such a fresh and refined way. They face-bombed. Chi Nemo looked up at the mirror and adjusted his collar. "Also, don't disturb me." The shadow guards. Young Master, you really aren't like how you were when you were in front of young Master Joe. It's too obvious that you are a hypocrite. Then, Chin Mo didn't speak. Because he was thinking about something, about the dream he had during the operation. A dream was a reflection of a person's psychology, or the remnants of memory and foresight. He studied psychology, so he was very clear about this. But Chin Mo didn't understand why he had such a dream. Because when he was young, he didn't know anyone, let alone hugging a little girl to sleep. If it was someone else, they would definitely think that it was a dream. But Chin Mo was different. In the dream, he didn't see the little girl's face. This became an unsolvable mystery. Who exactly was she? Maybe he should find time to investigate himself. After all, Chin Mo's eyes deepened, just as he was about to speak. At this moment, suddenly, a voice came from outside the window. It was clear and pleasant. Brother Mo, Brother Mo. It was that fellow. Chin Mo raised a brow. Bojo stood outside, her hands pressing on something, her voice unusually loud. Brother Mo, walk to the window, I'll show you something fun. That voice was indeed louder. Moreover, Chin Mo's receiver wasn't switched off. Even the shadow guards heard this sentence. They looked at each other curiously. What did young Master Joe want to show young Master? Chin Mo wanted to know too. He walked to the window. The moment he opened the curtains, he saw a white heart-shaped pattern on the blue sky that was washed by the sunlight. Two small drones created this pattern. They used the white fog that was released by dry ice to form a heart. The person operating the drone was standing under the sunset. She had a slender figure, and there was a smile on her face. Her mole shone, and her silver hair fluttered in the wind. Her face was so beautiful that people couldn't take their eyes off her. At this moment, she raised her head, her black eyes beautiful. She asked him like a child, Brother Mo, do you like my present? Chapter 1104. The white gas formed a heart in the air, looking like a marshmallow. The lingering scent of dusk and the white clouds in the blue sky. Everything was different because of someone's existence. At that moment, even the air was filled with a slight sweetness. Chin Mo could feel his heartbeat. If it wasn't for the restricted conditions, he would probably have hugged the only person who could disturb him. That was the only way to calm the restlessness in his blood. Fortunately, one of them was upstairs while the other was downstairs, so he hadn't lost his mind. Just looking at that face, his gaze couldn't help turning gentle. Chin Mo didn't even notice this. On the other hand, the shadows who had heard the commotion asked, Young Master, what happened? That should be young Master Joe's voice, right? But it was a little blurry. They couldn't hear it clearly. Chin Mo didn't retract his gaze. He stood by the window with one hand in his pocket. His voice was calm. Nothing much, someone just confessed to me. The shadow guards, wait a minute, the person who confessed was young Master Joe. They had wanted to ask more questions. Unexpectedly, the usually aloof young master opened his mouth again at this moment. If you really want me to describe what kind of confession scene it was, I can also tell you. A certain someone got two drones from God knows where and was controlling them remotely. He used the exhaust to draw a heart in the sky for me. The shadows. Young Master, when you say these words, can you not smile? Of course, you are still single so you probably won't be able to enjoy such treatment. Chin Mo's voice was calm as usual. But the shadow guards could still hear the boastful tone in his voice. Chin Mo glanced downstairs. All right, I have to go down to receive the gifts. If not, a certain someone might cry. The shadow guards, why did they have to communicate with their young master about the kidnapping? Ever since their young master had been kidnapped, there hadn't been a day when they weren't showing off their love. In the courtyard, Bojo kept the remote control. She was still a little shy and nervous. After all, she had never confessed like this before. She felt that it was rather romantic, but she didn't know what the Almighty was thinking. But there was one thing. With Bojo's confession, the few kids who had wanted to get close to the castle but didn't dare to, all ran over. Their snow-white skin, blue eyes, and soft golden short hair made them look like little angels. Their cheeks were all pink. One of the boys was still wearing a small shirt and pants. He was looking at the drone in the sky. There were 3 other children beside him. They were all American natives. They were around 4 years old and looked very pretty. They could not help but exclaim, "Wow!" Row after row of them stood there, the amazement on their faces was obvious. Big brother. The youngest girl tugged at the sleeves of the little boy. The old butler watched from inside the castle. He was envious. In this aspect, his young lord seemed to have a natural affinity. Unlike him, the children didn't want the candy he gave them. Even so, the old butler wouldn't let others see his loneliness. He raised his hand to look at his pocket watch. After seeing his young lord's rare confession, it was time for him to prepare dinner. Come to think of it, it wasn't bad for young Master Qin to stay here. Compared to the past, his young lord was rarely so energetic. She was smiling every day. It wasn't like the past. Even her smile wasn't so bright. She did everything alone. Other than him, there wasn't anyone else accompanying his young lord. Now that the old butler was getting on in years, sometimes he would wonder what his young lord would do if he wasn't around anymore. In this huge castle, his young lord would really be the only one left. His young lord might seem approachable, but in reality, it wasn't easy to get close. This was probably the trait of the Asians. Fortunately, his young lord had someone she wanted. Even though the old butler knew that this person's identity wasn't suitable for her, money couldn't buy his young lord's love. The old butler smiled. If that was the case, he should find some time to invest in the Yin family. He had to admit that the old butler was definitely close. His way of thinking wasn't too far off. On the other side, when Qin Mo walked down, Bojo had just finished sending the drone into the courtyard. Qin Mo stuffed a hand into his pocket, his gaze deepening as he looked at her. "You're giving a gift to someone else? I don't understand your sincerity at all." Bojo paused. "The one for Brother Mo is in the sky. The drone is also a part of the gift." Was Qin Mo that childish? If it was up to him, why would he give something to someone else? Bojo caressed the bridge of her nose. She didn't reply. She hadn't expected the Almighty to be so obsessed with the drone. Qin Mo tilted his head. His face was still good-looking. "Besides, you gave it to a kid. Will he know how to play with it?" Bojo smiled. "Brother Mo, I only gave one drone. I still have another one." With that, she took the other drone out from the bushes and passed it to Qin Mo. At this moment, the communication device was still switched on. The shadow guards only had one thought after listening to the entire process. Their young master was so petty that he was even jealous of a kid. How scary. But Qin Mo had his own thoughts. He caressed the wings of the drone with his fingers and lifted the corner of his mouth. Bojo glanced at his handsome face and muttered softly, "He really looks like him." She didn't expect the Almighty to hear her. Qin Mo turned, his voice calm. "What does he look like?" "Nothing, I'm just saying that the little boy looks like my childhood friend." Bojo couldn't possibly say that she had given him the drone because he looked like his childhood friend. That was the perfect explanation for Bojo. Unexpectedly, Qin Mo laughed coldly. "Is that so?" Bojo couldn't tell if the Almighty was happy or unhappy. Hadn't he laughed just now? Why did it seem like, which type do you like? Chin Mo asked again, his tone not casual. For example, those who act mature at the age of 4 or 5. Bojo paused. How was she going to answer this question? From a psychological point of view, this type of boy is very shrewd. Chin Mo arched a brow. You're so dumb. You definitely can't tell how good your little friend is. Bojo didn't reply because it was hard for her to hold back her laughter. After all, it was really interesting to hear the Almighty ridiculing himself. What else? What's so bad about this type of boy? Bojo cleared her throat and asked seriously. Chin Mo stood there, his tone calm. There are many, but you don't have to understand so much. I'm the one you should understand. With that, Chin Mo walked into the castle. Bojo paused for a second. Thinking about his words. Once she tasted sweetness in her mouth, she walked to the Lamborghini and started the engine. She lowered her voice. Little Blackie, I think my confession seems to have worked. If it doesn't have any effect, I'm starting to suspect that the person you like is gay. The navigation system fluctuated. But, Master, is it really appropriate to use this method of chasing girls on a boy? Bojo lifted her lips. Why not? I'm going to continue understanding my little secretary. You're in charge of searching for information. I'll do some research later. What information? The navigation system didn't understand. Didn't Master always think that the information it found was too simple and crude? Bojo smiled. Of course it's to find out which type is good and doesn't have any side effects. Also, it allows me to do whatever I want. That's about it. The navigation system, who was the one who said that her goal wasn't to sleep with others? Master, you're so shameless that even I'm scared. Why? Are you stunned by my handsomeness? Bojo watched as the navigation system fluctuated. She patted the Lamborghini. Calm down, do a good job. The navigation system was cold. Isn't it just sleeping with someone? It's simple. Chin Mo entered the hall. He didn't know how someone was thinking about sleeping with him. There were some things he told himself not to care about but he couldn't help thinking about. Why was she able to have absolute trust in that person? She couldn't do it in front of him. Childhood sweetheart, these 4 words. In the past, he didn't think much of it. But now, it was an eyesore. Even the restlessness from receiving the gift was suppressed. After all, he was a kidnapped person. There were some things he had to pay attention to. After Chin Mo thought it through, he sat on the wooden chair beside the dining table. He was indeed under house arrest. He didn't have a phone or any other means of communication. There didn't seem to be anything in this castle. Besides the Lamborghini that only Bojo could drive, there weren't any other means of transportation. This place could be considered isolated from the rest of the world. That fellow had been living here all along. Chin Mo stood up and walked to the bookshelf. Indeed, it was different from when he was at the Fu family's house. There weren't books like Overbearing CEO Falls in Love with Me. Instead, there were books about computers and medicine. Of course, there were also some foreign classics. There was a complete set of the Sherlock Holmes series and more detective reasoning books. Chin Mo understood that a person's anti-reconnaissance ability had to go through later stages of training. Now, he also understood why the police couldn't do anything to Z. Because when your opponent knew you better than you definitely wouldn't be able to catch her. Chin Mo's gaze swept across the books. He flipped open one of them. After reading 2 pages, he put it down. The fastest way to understand a person was to see what kind of books this person read and what kind of people he interacted with. Z never interacted with anyone. When he came here, Chin Mo realized that there was only the old butler. Moreover, judging from the old butler's surgical technique, he was meticulous and had a strong sense of observation. When Chin Mo did things, he had always been thorough. He was also calculating the time so that no one would discover his current actions. But when Chin Mo flipped to the third book, his gaze paused. He completely forgot about the time. Because he saw a photo. It was placed on the bookshelf. It was an old photo. Chapter 1105. In the photo was a little girl around 4 years old. She had soft black hair, clear eyes, and a face that looked like it wanted to be pinched. From the bridge of her nose to her mouth, she was delicate and pleasing to the eye. She also had a naive look. Logically speaking, with such looks, she should be very obedient. However, her movements looked like she was climbing a wall. One of her short legs had already stepped on a tree branch. It was a little like a little tyrant had run out, full of arrogance and domineeringness. That posture really made it seem like no one could stop her pace. The photo was probably taken secretly. Otherwise, the little girl wouldn't have turned around. Her round eyes were looking somewhere, and her eyelashes were long and black. It was probably a group photo. He could vaguely see another person in the photo. Below the photo, half an arm and a pair of hands could be seen. The hands were also very small. But even so, the observant Almighty Chin could tell that it was a boy's hands. Boy, Chin Mo's fingers tightened. He was about to put the photo back. An old voice with a low laugh came into his ears. That was when young Lord was young. When she was young Lord wasn't as obedient as she is now. She always played with Louis next door. She didn't listen to anyone and liked to climb walls. She even climbed secretly. This was her climbing the wall next door. Louis found out and asked her to come down. Speaking up to this point, the old butler shook his head, a doting smile on his face. Unfortunately, young mistress was too young back then and didn't want to jump down directly. Luckily, Louis told her to jump, and he caught her from below. Master was the one who took the picture, but unfortunately, Louis wasn't there. Chin Mo took another look at the photo. The little boy was wearing a black suit. Even though only his hands were exposed, it was enough to tell that he liked to dress up since he was young. Louis. American. He's Chinese. His English name is Louis. The old butler smiled and said, I wasn't around at that time. Everything I heard was from others. When young mistress first came here, she always talked about her little friend. Sometimes, when she ate something good, she would say that it would be great if her pet was here. Later on, young mistress did many things and got into trouble, so her personality became like this. The old butler's eyes darkened as he reminisced. So, if young Master Chin wants to see something, you can ask me directly. According to young mistress, she will send you back once your hand recovers. I hope young Master Chin won't do anything to hurt young mistress. This sentence was very obvious. In reality, the old butler knew that it was impossible for young Master Chin not to know that young Master Chin had been investigating her ever since he came in. But since she didn't say anything, he pretended that nothing had happened. However, if some things were known by outsiders, the young master's safety would not be guaranteed. From the old butler's point of view, he would definitely be wary of Chin Mo. However, no one knew. Almighty Chin's thoughts were all on that photo. Whether it was the meaning expressed in the photo or the old butler's description. Chin Mo was very clear. This Louis was very important to someone. Chapter 1106. That was why that person had stopped after watching Hoshino's competition video. Every time that person glanced up at Hoshino, there was a strong sense of connection. He told himself not to be bothered. But it felt as though there was a huge rock pressing down on his chest. Even lifting his hand to place the photo back in its original position would affect his heart. It was as though he had returned to that day. When they had sparred at the plaza, a BMW Tomahawk had appeared and taken her away. That trust and cooperation. He had thought that it was only between them. But now, there was a person who appeared in her life one step earlier than him. It was a reality that couldn't be changed. It seemed as though there was nothing he could do. Chi Nemo returned to his original position. His side profile didn't look the slightest bit emotional, noble and handsome. Even the curve of his chin was perfect. Chi Nemo knew that this elder was giving him a warning. Even though he knew it wasn't possible. But he would still think about it. If only he had been the first person to appear in her life. If only he had been the one to carry her down from the wall in the photo. Chi Nemo, who had always been known for his rationality, had actually used the word if. The last ray of light disappeared. Before dinner started, candles were lit on the dining table. The silver cutlery was placed on the table, reflecting the gentle light. Bojo felt that this was the first time she was hosting the Almighty at home. Romance couldn't be lacking. Since there weren't any roses, she had plucked a lot of wild roses from outside. Chi Nemo glanced at her but didn't say a word. Bojo sat down, arching a brow. What was wrong with that? She turned back to look at Grandfather Butler, who had a faint smile on his face. She glanced up, sweeping a glance at the bookshelf. She had a rough idea of what had happened. Bojo remained silent for a moment before walking to the side to grab a small laptop. She inserted the USB drive and opened one of the documents. Then she turned the screen. This is the recent case on Fifth Avenue. The police aren't able to find any leads since they don't have any tools. Especially the last person, he seemed to be lying in the bathtub, drowning if he didn't come out. At first, I suspected it was deep hypnosis, but then I saw this. Bojo changed the photo. Needle, these are probably drug addicts. Chi Nemo looked up at the youngster in front of him. Bojo chuckled. I know Brother Mo doesn't wish to speak to me now since my identity is known and I even kidnapped you. But I don't wish to see the maiden sacrifice happen and neither does Brother Mo regarding this matter. I can provide you with some information. Besides, I need your analysis. What kind of person do you think the culprit is? Chi Nemo replied, it doesn't matter who the culprit is. What's important is that the culprit will do it again. We have to find the similarity between these few people to deduce the next culprit. Common point. They are all Chinese. Bojo couldn't see anything from the photos. I'll check later. MMH, Chi Nemo replied absent-mindedly, swirling the wine glass in his hand. Even his voice sounded faint. Chapter 1107. Bojo couldn't change this. That was her way of doing things. For a long time, she couldn't seem to remember the Almighty. At that time, she almost went down the wrong path. She only understood when she lost someone important to her. In this world, there were too many people who couldn't tell right from wrong. They couldn't stand the fact that a person was serious and allowed the criminal to commit the crime again. They didn't care who was hurt because they weren't the one being hurt. They didn't understand the torment of saying it but not saying it out loud. They didn't understand what it felt like to be trampled on after being hurt. When a person did something wrong, no matter how big the matter was, as long as they showed weakness, they would be comforted. That shouldn't be the case. Who was the real weak one? They were the ones who were persecuted and couldn't explain themselves. Many people couldn't afford to be tormented but they did it regardless of the cost. They wanted fairness. Many accomplices trampled on this fairness, making it impossible for it to raise its head. Even though there was the law, it wasn't the strongest weapon. Hence, she chose to use this method to expose some things. At the very least, when a girl was bullied, she would have the courage to say no. That way, the person who liked to lie on her back wouldn't leave just like that. At the very least, after a mother defended her daughter's rights, she would receive the compensation she deserved. She wouldn't have to go through so many trials and only receive malice. The real culprit had gotten away scot-free, and nothing had happened to him. In the past, Bojo had the thought of changing. But now, she wouldn't give up this method for anyone, even if it was that person she really, really wanted. Both of them didn't speak. The atmosphere at the dining table wasn't good either. No matter how beautiful the roses were, it didn't ease the tension between them. Even in the castle, there was silence. The old butler stood at the side, wearing white gloves. He wiped the transparent wine glass, his eyes half-lidded. Then he walked over with a bottle of red wine, his voice old but natural. "Young Master Qin is very interested in your childhood. Young lord, maybe you can have a chat." Qin Mo frowned, not saying a word. Bojo glanced up. "Childhood? Yes." The old butler said in English. Young Master Qin looked at the photo on the bookshelf for a long time. "You can tell young Master Qin about you and Louis." Bojo coughed lightly before replying, "Nothing much." "Young master, are you shy?" The old steward pushed up his glasses and observed the expressionless young master of the Qin family, whose hand paused in picking up the wine glass. He continued, "Then I'll go get the diary you wrote back then. It'll be more convenient than what you're saying now." "Bojo, what happened to Grandpa Butler? He seemed to always mention her childhood." However, if the Almighty really saw the diary, would he remember something? The old butler was a man of action. After a short while, he brought over an aged book and passed it to Qin Mo. "Young Master Qin, you must be curious about our young lord. Her personality and childhood experiences are all in this book. You can take a look." Chapter 1108. But right now, he didn't want to see how close she had been to her childhood sweetheart. He had always been polite, even when it came to rejecting someone. "I'm not interested." With that, he wiped his mouth with a napkin and stood up. "Also, thank you for your hospitality today. I'm full, I'll be heading upstairs." Bojo glanced over at the plate with the broccoli on it and the empty wine glass. How could he be full after just one bite? The old butler chuckled. "I won't force young Master Qin, please." Bojo watched the scene, feeling as though there was a deeper meaning behind Grandfather Butler's smile. She didn't stay idle, she couldn't let the Almighty leave just like that. She had to continue attacking. Otherwise, her romantic confession would be a waste of time. Bojo arched a brow, placing the wine glass and steak on the table. She smiled. "I'm going to eat in the bedroom." The old butler wasn't going to interfere, but there was one thing he could remind her. "Young lord, a girl shouldn't be too proactive." "All right." Bojo took a moment before adding, "But I have to feed the Almighty something. I'll come down after he finishes this plate." The old housekeeper finally understood what it felt like to raise a child for someone else after taking care of him for the day. He let out a long sigh. "Young lord, you don't have to feel guilty towards young Master Qin since you will let him go. It's not just about the kidnapping." Bojo chuckled, carrying the plate upstairs. She didn't tell Grandfather Butler that she had been the one who owed him from the start. When she had been young, her father hadn't been around and she had been allowed to play by herself. Basically, he had been the one to raise her. He knew that she liked to eat and would always carry snacks in his pocket. Even during the winter, when he liked to wear a suit and attend various business meetings with grandfather and he would bring her along. When he didn't bring her along, he must have been angry because she had run out to play with others and dirted her hands. After all, the Almighty had been a clean freak since young. Or rather, it had been worse when he had been young. That day, he didn't take her out, and she wanted to sleep in his bed, so she climbed the wall. She didn't expect him to block her. Bojo could still remember the cold little boy standing there helplessly. "Little Bojo, are you an idiot? Come down, I'll catch you." Now that she thought about it, the Almighty had done everything he had promised her. At that time, she was always pestering him. Every time, she would rely on the fact that he wouldn't really get angry and ask him not to return to China. Because she would miss him. That year, the Almighty was supposed to go back for the spring festival, but after hearing what she said, he didn't leave. Instead, he hugged her and asked her to stick the spring festival couplets on the door frame. He told her that this was a Chinese custom and even picked up dumplings for her to eat. At that time, she was really happy, thinking that the two of them would always be like this. Unexpectedly, she was the first to leave after that. Even if her imagination wasn't very rich, she could roughly understand the feeling of being left behind. She was the one who owed him. She didn't even keep her promise, yet she kept asking him to stay. Bojo caressed the photo. There was a sweetness in the depths of her heart, but it was also a little bitter. Chapter 1109. Inside the room, Chin-mo stood by the window, unbuttoning his shirt with one hand. His gaze was deep. Just by looking at his handsome side profile, it wasn't possible to tell what he was feeling. This was the scene Bojo saw when she walked in. She wondered if the Almighty was unhappy that she had kidnapped him and wanted to return to China. He probably noticed where she was. Chin-mo turned, stuffing a hand into his pocket. He glanced up. "Sugar daddy, are you free again?" The mockery in his voice was obvious. The way the Almighty called her sugar daddy was like how an assassin would look at a blue wolf. Bojo coughed lightly and took another step forward. "Brother Mo didn't eat much down there just now. Grandfather Butler's steak isn't bad, Brother Mo can try it. If you aren't used to it, I have my own unique cooking skills." Chin-mo watched the food in her hands, not saying a word. He didn't show any signs of rejection. Bojo's eyes lit up. She understood Chin-mo. If the Almighty really didn't like it, his gaze would be filled with rejection and he would exude a cold aura. It was the kind of coldness that kept people 1,000 miles away. Bojo had seen it before. She was worried that the Almighty's coldness would be used on her one day. From the looks of it, there was still hope. Bojo lifted the corners of her lips. She picked up a piece of steak with her fork and fed it to him. Chin-mo glanced at her before opening his mouth. After swallowing the steak, he felt the weight on his chest lighten. Bojo watched Chin-mo. She didn't know how wonderful it felt to feed the person she liked. She had to hurry and feed him more. Bojo smiled. She picked up another piece of steak and passed it over. He lowered his lids to eat. He was so handsome that he looked like he was reading a comic. Bojo was in the midst of her happiness. Unexpectedly, the thin lips that were about to touch the piece of meat suddenly changed direction and touched hers. From this angle, it was Bojo. She could only see Bojo holding the tray. But Chin-mo was different. He held the back of her head with one hand and bent down. He didn't intend to end the kiss hastily. Her mind went blank. After it ended, Bojo's figure didn't change. Chin-mo pressed his forehead against hers, his voice hoarse. "Forget the person you knew when you were young." "Mmh." Bojo snapped out of her daze. "What?" Forget about him, Chin Mo repeated. Bojo wanted to say that it was a little difficult, but she didn't know how to say it. In the end, she reached out and hugged him. Instead of answering, she asked with a smile in her voice, "Brother Mo, are you jealous?" "Ha, why would I be jealous?" Almighty Chin didn't even mean what he said. "I'm reminding you not to be so stupid. You've been tricked since you were young." Bojo wanted to laugh, but she tilted her head and held it in. After all, it was a joy to hear the Almighty criticize himself. "Little Bojo, be serious." Chin Mo reached out and pinched the back of the youngster's neck. He seemed to be very unhappy that she was still playing along when he was so serious. Bojo glanced up sharply. "What did you just call me?" "Little Bojo." Chin Mo's voice was calm. "Isn't your surname Bo?" "Yes, my surname is Bo," Bojo repeated. In that instant, she seemed to have returned to the past. Every time the prince in the suit saw her, his handsome and aloof face would look as though he wanted to educate her. He would call her by her full name. "Little Bojo." The name made Bojo break into a sudden smile. She looked at Chin Mo with a hint of playfulness. "Brother Mo, call me that again." Chin Mo looked at her. After a long time, he stretched out his hand and flicked her forehead. "Little gangster Bo, when you say this, shouldn't you let go of my waist first? Are you having fun taking advantage of me?" "It's all right." Bojo didn't let go. "You kissed me just now. What's wrong with me hugging you?" "Honestly, Brother Mo, you can't have such double standards." Chin Mo arched a brow. "Do you think you can do whatever you want because you kidnapped me? Sugar daddy." Bojo let go. She thought that he was right. She couldn't go overboard. Even if she wanted to go overboard, she would have to wait until she got the medicine. Chin Mo walked to the study table. "Let's talk about the case first." "Sure." Bojo placed the tray down. She turned on the computer and pulled up the information. Chin Mo looked at the pictures. Every picture was like an information network. It seeped into his mind and formed a blurry picture. The Chinese stationed overseas are mostly international students. They live alone and don't have boyfriends. Their looks aren't outstanding and their family conditions are average. Check the online preview records before they died. Chin Mo's voice was calm, but he went straight to the point. Since they don't have a wide circle of friends, the way to target them should be on the internet. "I think so too." Bojo shook the USB in her hand. "That's why I checked before coming. The preview records are safe, but there's something I don't understand." Chin Mo glanced in her direction. "What is it?" "These numbers." Bojo opened the chat tool of one of the victims. A string of Arabic numbers appeared on the chat box. The victim's reply was also numbers. There were only 1 or 2 sentences and that was it. But the whole thing was written in such a way. Bojo instinctively felt that it was strange. Moreover, all the victims' chat records contain this content. Bojo tapped the spacebar and switched to another page. It's the same for this. For example, this string of numbers, 8464, 7486, 64, 54, 94, 2264, 96. What does it mean? Sherlock Holmes code? No. Chin Mo's gaze deepened. It doesn't seem like it. This is indeed a communication method they got from somewhere. If they use this method to communicate, the other party will respond. But this isn't Sherlock Holmes code. Bojo arched a brow. Are you so sure? Chin Mo spoke slowly. Do you think everyone knows how to read Sherlock Holmes code? Even if they want to kill someone, they have to make it easy for them to enter. That's what the murderer is thinking. Bojo supported the side of her face with her left hand. She looked lazy, like the young master of a wealthy family, deep in thought. If it wasn't Sherlock Holmes' code, what could it be? Simple. Like 1314 or something. This came to mind. Bojo was suddenly reminded of the Almighty's passwords. She glanced over at Chin Mo, who was still staring at the numbers on the screen. She didn't think that the Almighty would still sit beside her after knowing her identity. This was probably thanks to her cleverness in kidnapping the Almighty. Cool. Chapter 11:10. Bojo was good at self-affirmation. She glanced at the handsome face in front of her, thinking about when to drug him. When Chin Mo glanced over, he saw a certain someone with a mischievous look in her eyes. He didn't know what she was planning. He reached out and lifted her chin. Even if you want to tie me up, you have to retract your claws and behave yourself. Do you understand? Oh. There wasn't much sincerity in her reply. Chin Mo's eyes dimmed. He reached out and caressed her lips with his thumb. Are you brushing me off? Not yet. Bojo sat up straight and smiled at him. That pair of eyes seemed to be rippling with water, clear and limpid. Chin Mo's gaze deepened. There were only a few centimeters between them. If he lowered his head, he would be able to kiss her. Now, Chin Mo knew that she was doing it on purpose. He released her chin with his right hand and pressed down on her restless hand. Are you crazy for lust? Bojo smiled brightly. I'm checking on Brother Mo's injury. I remember that my wound is on my hand. Where are you going to touch it? Chin Mo's voice was calm and cold. There was an inviolable sense of abstinence. Bojo retracted her hand regretfully. It was so hard to be a gangster nowadays. Just as she stood up, her wrist was grabbed again. Chin Mo arched a brow. You want to leave after taking advantage of me? Otherwise. Bojo only managed to say 2 words before she was pulled over by a force. The voice beside her ear was still calm. It won't be that easy. Bojo didn't even think. She lifted her lips. Brother Mo can take it back. Their breaths intertwined. Chin Mo smiled and held the back of her head. He lowered his gaze and kissed her. The pleasant scent of mint lingered in the air. After a long time, Bojo felt her entire body go soft. She held onto his shirt tightly, her thoughts empty. Chin Mo wasn't any better. When he kissed her just now, he was still thinking about her childhood sweetheart. He wanted her to forget about him. At this moment, the soft and fragrant jade in his arms kept wanting to continue. Even though the location and time weren't right. But he couldn't resist his hot-bloodedness. Finally, when Bojo couldn't catch her breath, Chin Mo distanced himself from her. He lowered his lids to look into her clear eyes and retracted his breath. Bojo's eyes were still in a daze. When she saw him return to his usual self so quickly, she once again felt that using a honey trap on the Almighty would only have a temporary effect and wouldn't be able to take him down. Do you like it that much? The Almighty's voice came from beside her ear, and there was a rare hint of laughter in his voice. Bojo replied. Sweet. When she said this, she didn't forget to hug Chin Mo's waist. She didn't care if the Almighty hated her for being so clingy. She had already kissed him. Contrary to her expectations, that face did not show any signs of resistance and allowed her to fool around. The coldness in his eyes also disappeared. This should mean that he wasn't angry anymore. Then I could try to drug it tonight. Now that the atmosphere was so good, he might as well stay for a while. Chin Mo was indeed too indulgent with her. He was investigating a case, but he allowed her head to rest on his shoulder. Her head sank bit by bit, and in the end, she even snorted. He retracted his gaze from the screen and straightened her head with one hand. When the old butler came in, he saw this scene. He was still holding tea and snacks in his hands, and he smiled politely. Young master must have disturbed young master Chin. I'll wake her up now and let her go back to her room to sleep. There's no need for that. Chin Mo was nonchalant with a hint of pampering. Her head isn't that heavy anyway. The old butler chuckled, not saying anything else. He placed the exquisitely made teapot and teacups down and walked out of the room. On second thought, young lord's kidnapping wasn't a bad idea. The sky outside turned dark. Bojo wouldn't sleep for long in this position. When she opened her eyes, the first thing she saw was the beautiful curve of his jaw. It reminded her of when she had been young. Back then, when they had attended the ball at night, he had been younger than her, but somehow, he had the strength to carry her and leave early every time. Grandpa had even joked that his grandson had disregarded etiquette for her. Her heart would always soften at the thought of this. At this moment, Chin Mo lowered his gaze. You're awake. Sugar daddy. Brother Mo, the way you address me. Bojo wasn't used to it. Chin Mo's tone was calm. Why? Isn't this how you call yourself? That's true, but the tone isn't right. I don't feel anything. Bojo placed her chin on the back of his uninjured hand, looking a little rascal. Chin Mo glanced at her before glancing at the teacup. Bojo was smart. She lifted the teacup and placed it by Chin Mo's lips. She had to be proactive when it came to feeding him. I'm asking you to drink it yourself. Aren't you thirsty after sleeping for so long? Chin Mo couldn't help kissing her. Why are you so dumb? Bojo paused. She was obedient at this moment. She drank the tea and decided to take advantage of the good atmosphere to get the medicine. Where are you going? Chin Mo glanced up. Bojo started acting again. There aren't many clothes for Brother Mo to wear in the castle. I'm going out to buy some for you. It's best if it's more suitable for home use, so it's easier to take off. Easier to take off. Chin Mo repeated these 5 words slowly. He seemed to be hinting at something. What do you want to do? Bojo was already feeling guilty. With his question, she felt even more guilty. Fortunately, she had strong mental fortitude. I don't want to do anything. It's just convenient when you shower. Is that so? Chin Mo's gaze was faint. You want to buy clothes in the middle of the night? Bojo smiled. The Fifth Avenue is bustling at this time. With that, Bojo went down the stairs. Chin Mo glanced at the photo she had been holding while she had been sleeping. He frowned. Out of sight, out of mind. He turned on the receiver and a voice came through. Young master, madam is asking how long you will be meeting her parents. When the shadow asked this question, he lifted his head to look at the moon in the sky. He wondered when his young master would end his journey of torturing the dogs. Chin Mo replied nonchalantly, not necessarily. I feel good now. What feeling? The shadow didn't understand. Chin Mo tapped on another photo and said slowly, the feeling of being chased. Shadow. I want to hang up. Protect my mother. I don't need you for now. With that, Chin Mo turned off the receiver. He listened to the sound of the car outside. His gaze deepened. Bojo was sitting in the car. Her fingers were on the steering wheel. Her tone was devilish. Come, little Blackie. Let's have a heart-to-heart talk. Master, are you asking me which medicine is good? I have already found out. There is a shop not far from us. It is said that it can raise a person's body temperature. You can give it a try. Bojo said as she drove. I'm not talking about the medicine. Brother Mo might drive you in the next 2 days. When he tells you the password, you can let him drive away. Master, you don't have to use such methods to test me. Even if your little vixen is handsome, I won't be swayed. Bojo paused when she heard the intelligent reply from the navigation system. Are my words that untrustworthy? Untrustworthy. It is all a test. It is all a ploy. The intelligent navigation continued to move. Bojo arched a brow. I'm sad. You can wash yourself tomorrow. Lamborghini. Little Blackie. Have you ever seen a car wash itself? Even an intelligent one. How could it wash itself? Master would bully it. All right, stop being arrogant. Let's talk business. Bojo turned the car. Where is the shop? Intelligent navigation. Was this the business Master was talking about? The road out of the castle wasn't a short one. In order to be more natural, Bojo ordered a set meal from Burger King. After all, the Almighty hadn't eaten much today. Bojo's attire was suitable for the season. She wore a black leather jacket that accentuated her long legs. She wore a black mask on her face. Someone at the side whistled when he saw her. As for the shop that little Blackie mentioned, the decoration style was indescribable. Bojo had never been to such a shop before. She entered with a mischievous air. The owner was a black man. Hey, try this. It's not bad. Bojo looked at the leather whip recommended by the owner. Her tone was serious. I'm here to buy medicine. The black man's eyes lit up. He pulled the drawer open. Which wild cat do you want to conquer? I have everything here. Something that doesn't have any side effects on the body and can prevent people from being resistant to medicine. These are the only 2 requirements. You don't have to go overboard. Bojo's voice was a little low. The owner could tell. He chuckled. You Asians are shy in this aspect. Take it. I guarantee it will meet your needs. Bojo thanked him after taking the medicine. Then, she seemed to have thought of something. She lowered her body. I heard that the area isn't peaceful recently. I'm staying next door. I just moved in. I heard someone died recently. Will there be any problems? Officer, it's boring if you do that. The manager shook his finger, his expression a little bored. Bojo arched a brow. Officer. Brother, you seem to have misunderstood. What am I misunderstanding? Do you see the police car parked outside? Aren't you guys here every day because someone died here? The owner packed his things. He looked as though he was trying to say, don't treat me like a fool. Bojo chose this shop because of these reasons. Even though she was exposed, she didn't panic. Brother, I'm here to buy medicine. I'm also worried about my safety. After all, I'm Chinese. The shopkeeper believed him. He turned around and asked, You're really not a police officer? How do I look like one? Bojo sighed. She looked like a youngster who had her first awakening of love. I like someone very much. I feel like there's something missing between the 2 of us. That's why I'm here to buy some medicine. It'll add some atmosphere. The shopkeeper was good at such things. He chatted with Bojo for a long time. For example, what kind of girls in America liked. He scanned Bojo from head to toe. Orientals like you are quite popular now. They like to call you little cuties. But it depends on the girl you like. What type is she? Domineering, cold, and a little tsundere. Bojo was melancholic. She gets angry easily. Her eyes can freeze people. The owner frowned. That's a queen. That's right, a queen. Bojo glanced at the police car outside. She seemed worried. At this moment, the owner believed her. He was probably worried about his safety. When Bojo took out the money, he reminded her. Don't go home too late. The moment Bojo heard this, she knew what the manager had seen. Hence, she tried to ask. The owner smirked. Don't worry. You haven't snatched anyone's boyfriend. Snatch my boyfriend? What do you mean? Bojo instinctively knew the main point. The store manager looked around and said, I don't know about the others, but 2 of them liked the same man. The man brought them here to buy something. One of the girls even received a warning call from the other girl. I didn't expect the 2 girls to be gone just like that. Like the same man. Bojo lowered her eyes. A glint flashed across her eyes. She tried to organize her thoughts. But other than investigating the man, she didn't have a better idea. It seemed like there were some problems that required the Almighty's analysis. The police would get the news in less than a day. It would be hard for her to interrogate him if he was taken away. From her current perspective, the man was the biggest suspect. But if that was the case, it would be too simple. How could she explain the string of numbers in the chat records? Bojo retracted her gaze. She seemed to have thought of something. She pulled out a picture. There's something else. This is the picture. Do American girls like to play like this? She sent it to me, but I don't understand it. She keeps sending numbers. I don't want her to think that I'm old-fashioned, so I wanted to ask someone. The manager looked at the photo and was also very confused. Boy, what is this? Is this a new hobby of you international students? I really don't know about this. You can go and ask your classmates. Maybe they will tell you since you are pitiful. That's all I can do. Bojo walked out of the shop with a regretful expression. She opened the car door and sat in the car. She watched as the 2 plainclothes policemen entered. She didn't leave much information. That was all she had. If she asked again, the owner would be on guard. She decided to stop. At the very least, she had to make sure that she heard the truth. Bojo supported her chin with one hand, deep in thought. The luxurious car paired with the trendy jacket made her look like the dark male lead in the music video, Cold and Cool. On the streets, the American girl whistled at Bojo when she drove past. Hey, are you interested in playing? Chapter 11:11. Bojo was used to their open-mindedness. A glint flashed across her eyes and she smiled. Sure. Lamborghini. That wasn't right. Why was this happening? Master was supposed to go home to sleep after buying the medicine. Why was she fooling around outside? Master wasn't usually so easy to meet up with. Bojo reversed the car, her arms hanging out the window as she watched the girls. Where are we going? We have a party. One of the girls with a good figure winked. You will definitely like it. Bojo held her forehead with one hand. It's a pity my English isn't good. Oh. You've already spoken well. There are Chinese people in the party. The girl smiled. You won't be lonely. Bojo smiled. Lead the way. The American girls became even more rowdy. They looked at Bojo with interest. Lamborghini reminded her, Master, they are looking at you as though you are looking at your little vixen. TSK, they are always thinking about how to get their hands on you. Little Blackie, do you have eyes? Bojo followed behind the group of girls. The navigation system continued to fluctuate. Through the tones of you humans, my powerful system is able to distinguish the emotions within. Fine, even though you're more reserved than these people, you're all the same. You always want to sleep with someone. Little Blackie, you didn't follow me to China. Do you know the popular saying in the esports circle? Bojo memorized the route as she drove. The navigation system asked, "What is it?" Chin Mo is the only beauty in the world. It's a pity he can't sleep. Bojo replied lazily. You wouldn't understand even if I told you. The navigation system vibrated. I never expected Master's little vixen to have such a strong background. Of course, Bojo replied. She stopped the car and glanced over. It was indeed a party. The reason she had agreed to attend was because it was nearby. After all, there was a Chinese girl in the car. The parties in America were basically nightclub style, and some people could even be seen swaying their bodies inside. The music was great too. It was a heavy metal series with a DJ leading the beat. Bojo found a chance to chat with the girls. The Chinese girl was the one she talked the most. At the same time, he asked them about the popular way of chatting over here. I'm talking about the internet. I just came here and I'm not used to it, she explained. One of the American girls said, speaking of this, I saw my friend typing a string of numbers when she was chatting with someone. Do you Chinese like to chat in such a mysterious way? Is that why you came to ask us? Chinese. Bojo arched a brow. He was Chinese again, which meant that the locals didn't have this habit. Let's not talk about this. Do you want to go home with me today? The girls sat down next to him and smiled charmingly. My family's wine is very good. Bojo smiled devilishly and stood up. It's not convenient. What's inconvenient about it? The girl's expression of pity was somewhat seductive. Bojo laughed lightly. I'm afraid that if I leave with you, that person at home will be jealous. I can't deal with that person's jealousy. The American girl hooked her fingers around the black leather jacket. Just one night, he wouldn't be able to find out. It's up to you whether you are loyal or not. Bojo blocked her hand and smiled. I'm going, bye. The American girls watched the youngster's smile and followed her out, wanting to keep her. When they saw her leaving in a hurry, they grumbled, Mei Lin, you scared him. Come on, he doesn't look like he's scared at all. Moreover, look at where he just came from. Oh, my God, I'm so envious of the girl who can spend the night with him. At this moment, Bojo was already in the car. She held on to the steering wheel and did a beautiful drift. As an intelligent luxury car, Little Blackie's navigation system vibrated when it heard the conversation. It's a pity that they don't know that the person spending the night with Master isn't a girl but a man. You're tuning into the Journey of the Soul YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.